Chapter 5:15. As time passed, 100 years passed in a single night. The moment the coffin opened, Jiangli opened her eyes and turned into a beam of light, flying out of the green coffin. Her vital energy rose and her face recovered. Her hair turned from white to black. However, the life force that had disappeared could not come back. She turned around and looked at the man beside her. Jiangli fell silent. His injuries had actually recovered. Ning Chen did not care about the doubt in her eyes. He looked at the leftmost green coffin and a strange look flashed in his eyes. What was in the coffin? Why did it devour people's life force? He turned his palm and condensed his vital energy. A divine sun appeared and entered the coffin. However, a shocking scene occurred. The divine sun fell and disappeared in an instant. Ning Chen's face darkened. This coffin was indeed strange. There were 3 coffins, each more strange than the last. In the middle, there was only one coffin that had not been opened. Its oppressive aura was faintly discernible. Even before it was opened, it gave people goosebumps. Ning Chen walked forward and pressed one hand on the middle coffin. He held the green cauldron in his other hand and was fully focused. If anything went wrong, he was ready to smash the cauldron down. Seeing Ning Chen's action, Jiangli suppressed the weakness in her body and flew out of the stone hall without hesitation. He had already gone crazy. There was no need for her to die with him. With a rumble, the coffin opened, and a shocking scene appeared. The coffin in the center was completely empty. There was only a blood-stained white robe lying quietly inside. Ning Chen squinted. A blood-stained robe had such a terrifying aura. What kind of existence was its owner? After thinking for a moment, Ning Chen's body shook. He glanced at the other 2 coffins and his face became serious. An empty coffin that contained the rules of time, a green coffin that sealed the sword of execution, and a blood-stained robe in the last coffin. Could it be that the things in these 3 coffins were all owned by one person? Then where was their owner? Also, the leftmost coffin had been opened before they arrived. What was going on? Did someone come in and open it? Or was there some other secret? The answer was difficult to understand. Ning Chen did not think about it anymore. He took a step forward and a huge phoenix shadow appeared behind him. It swallowed the 3 coffins. Red light and green light rose, and the situation fell into a stalemate. Other than the green coffin with the fairy-slaying sword that moved a little, the other 2 coffins didn't move at all and couldn't be absorbed into the phoenix's body. Outside the stone hall, Jiangli couldn't help being shocked when he saw Lin Fan's actions. Just what was this madman thinking? Drink. In the stone hall, seeing the green coffin move, Ning Chen let out a deep roar and pushed his martial arts to the limit. The phoenix spread its wings and concentrated all its power on the rightmost coffin where the fairy-slaying sword was sealed. Amidst the rumbling sounds, the stone coffin moved and was slowly swallowed into the phoenix's stomach. In the next moment, the phoenix phantom vanished. Ning Chen staggered. In just a few short breaths of time, he had lost all of his strength. After resting for a moment, Ning Chen glanced at the 2 coffins that he couldn't take away. He no longer lingered and walked out of the stone hall. He calmly said, "Let's go." Jiangli recovered from his shock and followed him without saying a word. Just how many secrets was this person hiding? Was that phantom just now the legendary phoenix? Ning Chen walked at the front, his eyes constantly flashing with a contemplative light. Something still wasn't right. The bloodstains he saw on the road clearly hadn't been there for long, so why hadn't he seen anyone? There wasn't even a corpse. Behind him, Jiangli looked at the figure in front of her that had recovered. Her expression was complicated. Fortunately, she hadn't attacked him before, or there really wouldn't be any room for negotiation. The 2 of them continued onward. Before long, a huge bronze wall blocked their path. There was no way forward. "Miss Jiang, step back," said Ning Chen. Jiangli immediately retreated dozens of meters. Ning Chen summoned the green cauldron and viciously smashed it against the bronze wall. With a rumbling sound, the immortal palace violently shook. However, there was only a small dent in the bronze wall. It hadn't been smashed open as expected. Ning Chen frowned and turned around. He couldn't open this wall. Regardless of whether or not there was a path behind, continuing to waste time was meaningless. If you keep searching like this, even 10 lives won't be enough. Let me give you a word of advice, it's impossible to revive the dead, reminded Jiang Li. Let's go. Ning Chen didn't say anything more and continued to walk forward. Jiang Li's expression became gloomier and gloomier. For an illusory hope, he was willing to give up his life. Was this lunatic's brain damaged? The road ahead was difficult, but it was the only way. Ning Chen was almost possessed. He had been rational all his life. At this moment, he finally let go of his excessive calmness and searched for a chance to revive the dead regardless of the consequences. Perhaps there would be times in one's life when one was impulsive. In the past, the Marquis of the Great Xia dynasty couldn't be impulsive and didn't dare to make mistakes. He could only remain rational all the time. However, today, facing what might be the last chance to revive the ghost girl, Ning Chen couldn't be indecisive anymore. He could only risk everything. In front of the fork in the road, Ning Chen walked on another road. His expression was cold and unprecedentedly determined. Jiang Li had no choice but to follow him. Her life was under control. The light in the dim immortal palace was getting dimmer and dimmer. Fortunately, their cultivation wasn't low. They could barely see the road ahead. After walking for a long time, blood appeared in front of them again. Ning Chen's eyes narrowed. He walked quickly and looked at the blue stone in front of him that was stained with blood. His expression became more and more serious. Someone had indeed been here. The blood had dried up. However, the aura in the blood hadn't completely dissipated. Apparently, it hadn't been long. Ning Chen walked along the blood. From the blood, he could tell that this person was seriously injured. It was very likely that he was still in the immortal palace. Jiang Li followed him silently. The tiredness on her face was more and more obvious. The two walked for about 2 hours. The blood disappeared at a corner. Ning Chen stopped and looked at the darkness at the end of the corner. After a while, he walked inside. After 100 steps, the scene changed. It was a strange hall. Stone pillars went straight into the void. Under the pillars, a huge blood pool led to an unknown place. The horrible scene was shocking. In a different stone pillar, blood was still dripping. Beside it, half of a broken sword was inserted into the ground. The spiritual qi on the sword had almost dissipated. The longevity sword. Ning Chen's eyes narrowed when he saw the broken sword. He was shocked. In this case, the person imprisoned in the stone pillar was Ji Yaoguang, the King of Light. The Central Plains Sword God, a legend for 100 years. He could have become a supreme, but he chose to give up when he succeeded. That day, when the King of Light entered the demonic will see, Ning Chen had seen the white-clothed king's elegance with his own eyes. His sword shocked the world as if he was an immortal. This was an expert that even human sovereigns didn't dare to provoke. How could he be trapped here? Was there an existence that could suppress the King of Light in this place? Could there really be an immortal in the immortal palace? Ning Chen didn't hesitate anymore. He walked to the stone pillar and pressed his hand on it. Since he couldn't figure it out, then he would save the King of Light. Everything would be clear then. Sword light rose and circled around Hong Yi. Then, it turned into a stream of swords and crashed into the stone pillar. With a boom, the stone pillar couldn't bear the extreme power of the stream of swords. Cracks spread out for more than 10 zhang. Ning Chen raised his head and looked at the stone pillar. His eyes narrowed slightly. Everything in the immortal palace was sturdier than the previous. Above the blood pool, although the stone pillar had many cracks, it didn't collapse. After a violent tremor, it calmed down. Out of fear of injuring the King of Light inside the stone pillar, Ning Chen didn't use the green cauldron to smash it. Instead, he used his fingers to break apart the stone pillar. Jiang Li looked at the man in front of him and didn't say anything else. Right now, even if he destroyed the immortal palace, it wouldn't be strange. Half an hour later, with a boom, the stone pillar in front of Hong Yi collapsed. A white-clothed figure appeared from within. His eyes were tightly closed as he slowly fell down. Ning Chen took a step forward and grabbed the King of Light. With a flash, he quickly left the place. Hong Yi stopped Ten Zhang away. She gathered her true essence and examined the latter's injuries. Troublesome matter. A moment later, Ning Chen withdrew his hand. His expression became serious. The King of Light's blood had almost dried up. His lifespan was also almost exhausted. He was in imminent danger. To save or not to save him was a difficult choice. If he saved him, the price would definitely be great. Moreover, before the King of Light entered the demonic will see, he already didn't have much lifespan left. Even if he was saved, he wouldn't be able to hold on for too long. It was unknown if he could even wake up. In this immortal palace, danger came one after another. Every bit of strength lost made it harder to continue. Ning Chen hesitated for a moment, but in the end, he still chose to save him. Whether or not the King of Light could wake up, he couldn't give up on this opportunity. Ha! With a shout, a phoenix image appeared. A drop of blood flowed out from Ning Chen's chest. Within the dark red blood was a trace of gold. It was an extremely dazzling sight. Not far away, Jiang Li's gaze focused once more. It really was a phoenix. There was no mistake. That drop of blood didn't belong to a human. However, phoenixes were noble and pure. They hated humans to the extreme. Why would they give their phoenix blood to a human? The phoenix blood entered his body and a bloody light surged. The King of Light's blood that was constantly flowing out was replenished. One of his feet that was about to enter the gates of death was barely pulled back. Ning Chen's eyes flashed with a trace of exhaustion. Soon after, he gathered his true essence and poured it into the King of Light's body once more to help him recover. He had to do his best to awaken the King of Light. In this world, the person who could seal the King of Light definitely surpassed a sovereign. Perhaps he could obtain the answer he wanted from the King of Light. Time slowly passed. Ning Chen's phoenix essence was being consumed more and more. The King of Light's injuries were too heavy. It was almost impossible to save him. It was easy to imagine how difficult it would be to forcefully revive him. 1 hour, 2 hours. Ning Chen's red robes were soaked with sweat. In order to find the King of Light's whereabouts, Ning Chen didn't hesitate to pour his phoenix essence into the person in front of him. After 6 hours, the unconscious King of Light finally moved for the first time. His trembling fingers were very light, but they were very clear. Seeing this, Ning Chen increased his phoenix essence by another 30%. He gathered all his energy to help the King of Light awaken. After another 15 minutes, Ji Yaoguang finally opened his eyes. His eyes gradually regained their clarity. He looked at the youthful figure in front of him. A moment later, he weakly said, "Many thanks. Senior is too polite." Knowing that the King of Light wouldn't be awake for too long, Ning Chen didn't beat around the bush. He directly asked, "Senior, who sealed you here?" Chapter 5:16. The Alcade King was silent for a moment when he heard the young man's question, and then he said, "It was a red-clothed woman with a red veil over her head. However, I couldn't sense any vitality from her. She seemed to have died a long time ago, and she was more like a corpse god." Ning Chen's expression changed. "A ghost woman? How could that be?" The cries of the phoenix resounded. Amidst the rising phoenix silhouette, an ice coffin made of ice and snow appeared and flew between the two. Senior Alcade, was the woman you saw similar to her? Asked Ning Chen urgently. You know me? The Alcade King's expression changed. When he saw the figure in the coffin, his pupils constricted. Exactly the same. Ning Chen's body involuntarily trembled. Was this the previous Rakshasa's daughter of the underworld? However, the ghost woman had once told him that ghosts could not coexist, so 2 generations of Rakshasa's daughters could never appear in the world at the same time. Just why? Not far away, Jiang Li looked at the woman sleeping peacefully in the coffin. Was it this woman that made this person not even care about his own life? It was undeniable that this woman was so beautiful that she didn't seem like a woman of the mortal world. Unfortunately, beautiful women often had unlucky lives. How do you know me? The Alcade King suppressed a wave of dizziness and asked with his last bit of consciousness, how do you know me? When Senior and the Grand Elders of the various sects were attacking the demonic will see, I saw it with my own eyes from 5 miles away, said Ning Chen. The younger generation will surpass us in time. With a final sigh, the Alcade King could no longer suppress his tiredness and fainted. Ning Chen was silent. He waved his right hand, and the ice coffin and the Alcade King disappeared into the phoenix. If the woman Senior met wasn't an immortal, then what about an immortal? Did she even exist? What kind of existence was that dead Rakshasa's daughter? Had she been refined into a corpse god? Ning Chen suppressed the disappointment in his heart and walked out of the blood pool. The hope that he had seen with great difficulty was shattered once again. After taking 2 steps, he saw that Jiang Li wasn't following him. He turned around and frowned. Not far away, at the end of the blood pool, Jiang Li stopped and looked ahead. He couldn't hide the shock on his face. Ning Chen turned and walked forward. Looking at the end of the blood pool, his eyes narrowed. Amidst the dim mist, the starry sky was so beautiful and vast. It made one feel as if they were standing in a star field and looking at the universe. Sky beyond heaven, Ning Chen said slowly. The brightest star in the west is the spirit void, Jiang Li said with a complicated expression. Spatial laws. You can see, but you can't enter. Given your cultivation base, you won't last more than 3 breaths of time before being torn to pieces, said Ning Chen calmly. He did not know where the blood in the blood pool flowed to, but just because the blood could be sent out, it did not mean that it could also be sent out. There must be some kind of connection between sky beyond heaven and immortal palace that he didn't know about. Perhaps, a long, long time ago, immortal palace was built by those who became true immortals in sky beyond heaven. Jiang Li turned around and asked, have you thought about how to get out? No, Ning Chen replied. Jiang Li didn't probe any further. It turned out that a rational person was even more frightening when they lost their rationality. Regardless of the consequences, they were no different from a lunatic. Right now, other than saving that woman, he probably didn't care about anything else. Bringing the dead back to life was as difficult as ascending the heavens. At the very least, from what she knew, this was absolutely impossible. No need to look anymore. Let's go. Ning Chen reminded and walked out of the blood pool. Jiang Li looked at the stars in the distance and sighed. She turned around and followed. She didn't know if she would have the chance to return to the spirit void in this life. Just as the two were trapped in a mortal palace, demonic qi rose up from the demonic will ocean in the southwest of Zhongzhou. It broke through the restraints and pierced through the clouds. At this moment, everyone in Zhongzhou was shocked and they saw the pillar of demonic qi that shot into the sky. He's not dead. In the sky above the Zhao family, the human sovereigns all looked back in shock. Seeing this, the demonic butterfly immediately flew towards the southwest without saying anything. However, as soon as it moved, 3 human sovereigns blocked its path. Move! The butterfly in the flower stared coldly. Black light rose up from the flower burial flower in its hand. So what if I don't move? Tu Li said coldly in the black mist. Then die. After saying that, the flower burial flower's light was black and red. The demonic butterfly moved and the saber light opened up the path to the underworld again. With a loud boom, Tu Li received the saber and retreated a few steps. He couldn't withstand the might of the extreme martial technique and the blood in his body started to boil. Blood dripped down from the corner of his mouth. Even a human sovereign couldn't stop the demonic butterfly from advancing. Seeing this, the Lord of Taibai Prefecture could no longer sit and watch. With a wave of his horsetail whisk, the Taoist sword appeared, and its cold edge was threatening to kill. The demonic butterfly sensed it and turned around to face the Tao sword. The saber and sword clashed with a loud clang. Murderous light overflowed in all directions. Torrential waves surged between heaven and earth, and the night sky within 100 miles swayed because of it. On the other side, Ji Qiuyu also moved. Her slender hand was like metal and stone. The three human sovereigns worked together to kill the demonic butterfly. When the killing move arrived, the demonic butterfly waved its sleeves and the flower burial flower appeared again. The white saber split and blocked the woman's 5 fingers. Dai Wu, Qing Ping. In the aftermath, the 2 sabers danced and Qing Ping waved her sleeves. Rays of death light shot out. The 3 of them retreated at the same time. A bloody mark appeared on Ji Qiuyu's face. Not bad. Seeing the opponent's strength, the Lord of Taibai Palace gathered his vital energy. Green light rose between heaven and earth. The Tao sword in his hand shone brightly and revealed his peak cultivation. Tu Li and Ji Qiuyu also activated their vital energy and raised their cultivation techniques to the limit. Suddenly, the night sky became as bright as day. The 3 colors of light were dazzling. The demonic butterfly's gaze turned cold. It shouted and shone with bloody light. Its blood-red hair danced wildly and its butterfly wings appeared again. Why did it hate it so much? Maybe it was because the people in the world were ungrateful. Maybe it was because the human sovereigns were kicking them when they were down. Maybe it was because it regretted its incompetence. His eyes were filled with blood-red demonic butterflies. His murderous aura covered the sky and covered the sun. When he opened his butterfly wings, they were black with a hint of brilliance. It was exceptionally poignant. It hated it so much that it was covered in smoke. The demonic butterfly moved and butterflies danced in the sky. The 2 sabers were 30,000 feet long. The 3 human sovereigns faced it head-on. The sound of the saber and the sword clashing cut open the night sky and shook heaven and earth. The Tao sword slashed across. The demonic butterfly's head was scarlet red. However, the flower burial saber's momentum didn't decrease. The Lord of Taibai Palace's arm was also stained with blood. The saber was won and couldn't be blocked. The 4 human sovereigns appeared together. It was the most tragic killing scene in the past thousands of years. It wasn't inferior to the Battle of Qiu Yan who sealed the calamity 4,000 years ago. The 4 figures intersected in the sky. Blood splattered everywhere. Far away, at the foot of Swallow Cloud Mountain, in the Golden Buddha ancient temple, Lord Bodhi stood quietly. He looked at the pillar of demonic aura that soared into the sky and sighed. It was the first time he left the Golden Buddha temple for the south in 3 years. The demonic calamity was coming again. The human world couldn't bear such a calamity. The kindness of saving the world couldn't be forgotten. However, the calamity couldn't be tolerated either. If someone had to die for being ungrateful, then it would be Bodhi. The Buddha, who had a firm belief in protecting the world, took steady steps. Although they seemed slow, they were astonishingly fast. Even the ends of the world were within reach, and 1 step covered 100 miles. In front of the demonic will ocean, Bodhi appeared and walked in. His Buddha power swept away all the corpses. A strange force appeared in the dragon burial ground. Black light rose and devoured the life force of the intruders. Bodhi twirled his fingers and Buddha light shone brightly, blocking the corrosive force. The black light and Buddha light clashed violently. The Buddha moved forward quickly towards the direction of the pillar of demonic aura. In the underground stone palace, the demon body was refining half of Xian Luo's demonic aura. It had reached the crucial moment. In 2 years, the demon body's cultivation had increased rapidly. His black hair had turned white and his demonic nature was shocking. The demonic aura sealed in the yellow spring was endless. It was as if the demonic aura that came from the sky beyond heaven was inexhaustible. On the side, the Qi Lian sword's red light became more and more dazzling. It had returned to its peak state. Amitabha. At this moment, Buddhist rain fell from the sky and dispersed the demonic aura in the stone palace. Bodhi appeared and walked over slowly. His white robe fluttered in the wind. His peaceful face didn't have many traces left by time. The world's strongest Buddha had appeared in the demon suppression stone palace. Qi Lian trembled and gave a warning. The demon body sensed it and opened his eyes. Jiming Marquis, you shouldn't have fallen so low. Bodhi sighed softly when he saw the completely demonized figure in front of him. Human nature is evil. What's the difference between a demon and a Buddha? The demonic body stood up and clenched his fist. Crimson drill entered his hand, and a monstrous demonic aura rose, its might terrifying. Bodhi's eyes flashed with emotion. He didn't say anything else and opened his Buddha world, sealing the demon body's path of retreat. In a single thought, Bodhi used his Buddha world saint move again. His Buddha energy rose and he didn't hesitate anymore. He used his killing move right away. The demon body snorted and took a step forward, circulating the endless demonic aura in his body. His sword released Buddha light and slashed at the Buddha. With a clang, the Buddha palm blocked the sword. In the next moment, Buddha energy spread out and destroyed the demon body. Blood spurted out and the demon body retreated a few steps. However, the endless demonic aura suppressed his injuries. More demonic aura surged out from the yellow spring forbidden land. While destroying the demon body, it increased the power of the sword. Buddha, you can't kill me. The demon body held his sword horizontally and slashed with his fingers. The demonic aura was like an ocean, making up for the gap in cultivation. He stepped forward and fought the Buddha again. The palm and sword collided. The Buddha beads wrapped around the sword, trying to lock it down. However, the sword's edge was fierce and a sword aura was released, threatening the life of the Buddha. Bodhi's expression turned serious. He pressed down the Buddha beads in his hand and pushed away the sword aura. His Buddha palm formed a seal and slapped at the demon body. The demon body didn't dodge. He condensed demonic aura in his palm and used his endless demonic aura to resist the Buddha's attack. In the rumbling sound, the golden Buddha world trembled. The battle between the Buddha and the demon instantly turned white-hot. Close combat was extremely dangerous. One was strong, the other was crazy. The demon that the world couldn't tolerate. The sword opened the path to hell, walking alone in the yellow spring. The stone palace that had been silent for tens of thousands of years kept shaking. The confrontation between the Buddha and the demon had lasted for a long time and reached its peak. Blood flame. The blood flame around the demon body appeared again. It was endless, and the fear of burning the world shook the world. At the same time, under the stone palace, Xian Luo, who was suppressed by layers of seals, opened his eyes. His body forcefully absorbed the aftermath of the battle between the Buddha and the demon, attacking the weakening seals. Chapter 5:17. The battle between the Buddha and the demon in the Ghost Bodhi Stone Palace was intense. One sword, one palm, both produced dazzling light. The demon that was reborn used its demonic aura to block the palm power of the Buddha. The excess Buddha power that could not be removed was suppressed by the demonic aura. The Buddha and the demon that were destined to be unable to coexist made their final decision today. Great waves and undercurrents stole the brilliance of heaven and earth, and the golden Buddha world shook violently. Facing the demon, whose strength was no longer what it used to be, Bodhi could no longer easily suppress him. Bodhi's thought, pardon sins. Bodhi pinched his fingers and gathered the clear saint force. The prayer beads shook and the Brahma rain turned into a sword and slashed at the demon in the world. Facing Bodhi's move, the demon's expression turned serious. Demonic aura circled around his body. The crimson sword shone brightly and faced the Brahma sword. With a loud bang, the Buddha and the demon's power clashed. The demon retreated 3 steps. His blood did not stop flowing. He counterattacked again. The sword broke through the clouds and bloody demonic flames roared out. Bodhi turned his palm to block the sword. He used his Buddha energy to stabilize the collapsing golden Buddha world. The intensity of the battle was incomparable to the past. However, the stronger the demon fetus was, the more determined the Buddha was to slay sins. He did not show any mercy in his attacks. Every move was filled with the determination to slay demons and slay sins. Demonic technique, bloody path. Bodhi showed his full strength. The pressure of the golden Buddha world suddenly increased. The demon's sword power changed. The sword opened a bloody path, using the demon to overcome the Buddha. The bloody path led to the yellow springs. Bodhi's expression also became serious. He wrapped his hands around the prayer beads. The golden swastika appeared in front of him and blocked the sword. In the earth-shattering tremor, the Buddha retreated. One of the prayer beads cracked silently. Seeing this, the demon's sword spun rapidly. He turned his palm to the sword hilt and used another 30% of his strength. The sound of something shattering was heard. The golden swastika dissipated. The fierce sword passed through the prayer beads and slashed at the Buddha. Clang! The Buddha's palm blocked the fierce sword. The sword could not move an inch. The Bodhi's body could not be invaded. Ha! A hint of coldness flashed across the demonic body's eyes. With a deep roar, he once again broke through several layers of the yellow spring seal in his body. Terrifying demonic chi surged out. Amidst the raging waves, his white hair stood up. It was as if a demonic god had descended to the world, causing the world to tremble. The Buddha was dyed red by the sword. He took half a step back and the devil took half a step forward. Holding the sword, he cut the Buddha with 10,000 pounds. Amitba. With a Buddhist chant, Bodhi gathered Buddha energy in his right hand and struck out with a powerful palm. The demonic body didn't retreat. Instead, it advanced. Demonic energy protected its body as it punched out, meeting the Buddha palm head-on. The close combat becomes more and more fierce. Drops of blood dye the world of Buddhism red. The demon knows that his personal ability is not enough, so he plays to his strengths and avoids his weaknesses. He uses his sword and palm to close the distance, blocking the Buddha's chance to make a move. With the move right in front of him, the time it took for him to condense his yuan qi was greatly reduced. The difference in cultivation base was no longer an absolute factor in the outcome of a battle. Experience and reaction time had become the most crucial factors. With a tearing sound, the sword edge sliced through the Buddhist robes, drawing out a smear of blood. The Buddhist palm imprint landed on the demonic body's left shoulder, forcing it back half a step. It was a close fight. Even though there was a huge gap between the two of them, the knowing destiny state cultivators who had gone through countless hardships in their lives were almost unmatched in terms of combat experience. The two offset each other and forced the unequal battle to a draw. Just as the battle between the Buddha and the demonic body was in a stalemate, the battle between the 4 supremes of the Zhao family in Zhongzhou had also reached the most critical moment. The god of sabers and the butterfly of demons displayed their pinnacle martial arts attainments. The flower burial twin blades fought against the 3 supremes. For a moment, the wind and clouds were in chaos and the 9 heavens lost their color. The moon set and the sun rose. The battle was so fierce that it shocked the entire Zhongzhou. No one could believe that the butterfly of flowers, who had just fought against the supremes of the Zhao family, still had the strength to deal with the encirclement of the three supremes of the human realm. As the blue sleeves danced in the wind, saber light could be vaguely seen. One was black and the other was white. The twin blades shook the attacks of the three supremes one after another without falling into a disadvantageous position. Strong, so strong that it was shocking. The god of sabers, who could fight against the supremes of the human realm when he was in the half-supremacy realm, reached a shocking level once he stepped into the consummation realm. He could go against the immortals and fight against the supremes of the human realm head-on. The shocking battle finally attracted the attention of the experts in other regions. Northern Plains, Nanling, and the homeland of Western Buddha, many extremely powerful experts looked towards the north of Zhongzhou and watched the battle across regions. The ultimate of the martial path. In the homeland of Western Buddha, in the Divine Palace and the Demon Temple, two terrifying human supremes opened their eyes and looked at the butterfly of flowers countless miles away. Greed flashed in their eyes. In the world, there was almost no one who could achieve the supremacy realm with the ultimate martial path. Regardless of whether it was saber or sword, it was as difficult as ascending to the heavens to become the only one. 100 years ago, the Alcade king of Zhongzhou had this qualification. However, in the end, he chose to give up in front of the supremacy realm. Today, another supremacy with the ultimate of the martial path had appeared. It was really a fortunate thing. Above the supremacy realm, it was difficult to advance. If they could obtain the ultimate of the martial path, it might be of great help to them. Demon and Buddha, how about joining forces? In the Divine Palace, Zi Tiangong spoke slowly. Sure. In the Demon Temple, a gloomy voice came out and answered. That woman was extraordinary. One of them might be able to defeat her, but it would be very difficult to capture her. At the same time, on the western Jade Mountain, a bodhisattva with a calm face sat on a lotus platform and looked into the distance. A faint brilliance flashed in his eyes. The Western Jade Master, one of the three supremacies of the Buddhist sect, was one of the strongest people in the world alongside the supremacy of light and the supremacy of Bodhi. She was quietly watching the battle of the peak in Zhongzhou. Qing Ning, how long have you been on the mountain? The Western Jade Master asked after a long time. Beside her, the green-robed woman said softly, 3 years. Do you still have people you care about in the world? The Western Jade Master asked calmly. Yes, Qing Ning answered. Who? The Western Jade Master asked again. Family, Qing Ning answered. After today, go down the mountain with your eldest senior sister, the Western Jade Master said. Yes. Qing Ning nodded and did not ask more. In the ancient land of Changling, the Battle of the Peak in Zhongzhou also attracted the attention of the female supremacy. In the light, a pair of beautiful eyes looked quietly at the battle in the distance and did not speak. Why have you come out? The female supremacy's clone who was cultivating opened her eyes and asked. A supremacy with the ultimate of the martial path has appeared in Zhongzhou. I am worried that the two people in the Divine Palace and the Demon Temple will act, the female supremacy said calmly. The ultimate of the martial path. That legend of the Great Xia has reached the supremacy realm, the female supremacy was puzzled. No, it is the knife god of Zhongzhou, the butterfly in the flower. The female supremacy shook her head and waved her hand. The scene of the battle in the distance appeared in the world. The female supremacy looked at the red-haired woman in the battle and frowned slightly. She said in a low voice, the demonic calamity has not ended, but she has forced her way into the supremacy realm. This woman is truly extraordinary. Speaking of this, the female supremacy looked at the white-robed figure who was still sleeping on the stone platform not far away. She said, this woman has some connections with him. If necessary, she can help him once. The female supremacy nodded and said, the Purple Sky Palace and the Demon Buddha are cautious people. They will not act easily. However, if the two of them work together, it will be troublesome. Perhaps we can go to the eastern region and ask that legend to come out. He will not ignore his matters, the female supremacy suggested. Yes. The female supremacy nodded slightly. This was a feasible method. Immortal Palace, Underground Palace. The two bodies did not know of the butterfly crisis and were trapped together. They could not escape for the time being. The human supremacy was unshakable. The demon body fought one of the three strongest of the Buddhist sect. As the battle progressed, the demon body's injuries became more serious. There were also several sword wounds on Bodhi's body. However, the exchange of injuries was not equal. Experience and reaction were the biggest reasons why the demon body could fight to this moment. However, Bodhi was the strongest of the human world. He quickly adapted to the former's way of fighting. When the advantage was offset, the balance of the battle tilted again. The situation was unfavorable. The demon body waved its sword to block the Buddha's attack. With a bang, it took the opportunity to retreat. Immediately, it released all of its killing karma. The terrifying pressure penetrated the demonic will see and rushed to the 9 heavens. Demonic technique, Heaven's Tears. The move of breaking the cauldrons and sinking the boats made the sky weep. The sky turned blood red. Dark clouds covered the sky and thunder boomed. Dark clouds pressed down and the world shook. In the underground palace, the golden Buddha world shook violently. It was affected by the karma of killing and gradually collapsed. The resentment of the people that had restrained the Nether King in the past reappeared today. Although its power was far less than before, it was still terrifying. Bodhi felt the vital essence in his body stagnate. His body was seriously restrained. Bodhi heart meditation, Buddhism is boundless. Bodhi gathered his Buddha energy again. Rays of light illuminated the world. The swastikas rotated. Amidst the endless resentment, Buddha light rose and forcibly stabilized the collapsing Buddha world. Buddha energy, resentment energy, Buddha and sin collided at the peak. The rain of blood in the Buddha world was the heaven's sorrow. Scarlet Lotus ferocious aura also erupted at this moment to support the demon body. The move of breaking the cauldrons and sinking the boats couldn't be maintained for too long. The demon body stepped forward. The killing intent on his sword was endless. He wanted to kill the Buddha before the resentment energy was exhausted. Bodhi saw that the former was gambling with his life. He waved his prayer beads and used 70% of his attacks to block and 30% to dodge the demon body's sharpest light. How is it? Are you afraid? Or are you retreating? Buddha, your Buddha is watching you. How can you show weakness to a demon? The demon body's sword moved even more fiercely. At the same time, he mocked. Amitba. Bodhi was not provoked by the former's words. His moves were watertight. He blocked the demon body's final attack. Don't you want to know how Jian Bodhi died? Actually, the one who killed him was not the Nether King, but me. The demon body sneered. When Bodhi heard this, his mind shook. By the time he reacted, it was already too late. The demon body saw this opportunity and poured all of his devil energy into his sword. In that instant, time stopped. A merciless sword broke through the Buddha light's obstruction and pierced through his body. Ugh! Seeing a pool of blood, Bodhi retreated several steps. Blood gushed out of his chest, dyeing his white robes red. Buddha, I lied to you. The demon body sneered. The resentment energy and devilish energy flowed through the sword and into the Buddha's body. When the resentment energy and devilish energy entered his body, Bodhi staggered. He endured the pain in his chest and sent out a palm strike, forcing the former back. The demon body retreated a dozen steps. His mouth was red, but the smile on his face made one's hair stand on end. Bodhi, I can't kill you, but the current you also can't kill me. Properly experience these gifts that I've given you, said the demon body coldly. Pfft! Resentment energy and devilish energy erupted. Bodhi vomited another mouthful of blood. He knew he had to suppress the devilish energy in his body as quickly as possible. With rumbling sounds, the dragon gate appeared and he turned to leave. The demon body didn't stop him. Instead, his smile became even colder. Buddha, cherish your final moments. When you return to this world, perhaps your name will change. Bodhi has transformed into a demon. A human is no longer a ghost. How about Ghost Bodhi? Chapter 518. In the sky above Bayu City, the battle between the Supremes that affected the four regions was getting more and more intense. Blood spilled in the sky. The four Supremes were all injured, and their killing intent couldn't be concealed. Injuries were exchanged between their attacks. Demonic Butterfly's sleeves intertwined with her sabers. Her sleeves intertwined with each other like a dancing butterfly. However, the three Supremes weren't in the mood to appreciate her beauty. Their faces were solemn as they focused on dealing with the killing intent of the sleeves. The Tao sword shook the flower burial ground. The great white mansion lord took half a step back and waved his horsetail whisk. Demonic Butterfly sensed it and held the flower burial ground with her right hand. Blood splattered on her slender hand, and the saber was dyed red. Butterfly dance, frost. The demonic butterfly acted as if it didn't notice. The blade turned and forcefully counterattacked. Winds and waves surged, and a blood-colored frost appeared out of nowhere. Flowers blossomed in the void, transforming into a blade that buried the heavens. It erupted with extreme power, drowning out the 9 heavens. The great white mansion lord's expression turned serious. He activated his palm energy, and the Tao sword converged as he blocked with all his might. Heaven and earth were out of balance, and the aftermath spread out like a tsunami. The blood chi of the four Supremes started to roll, and they were forced back a few steps. Tu Li Wujiang, 3 karmic extermination. Seeing that they couldn't gain the upper hand, Tu Li Zun's eyes turned cold. He condensed a strange poison in his palm and slammed it out. Demonic Butterfly blocked the attack with her saber, but the strange poison spread along the saber. Demonic Butterfly's body was obviously slowed down. 3 karmic poison. Demonic Butterfly barely stabilized her body. Anger flashed in her eyes. She took a step forward and slashed down with the death saber. Tu Li Zun turned his palm to block the saber, but he felt an unstoppable force. With a bang, he was forced back a few feet. However, Demonic Butterfly's anger wasn't over yet. Her figure flashed, and she rushed forward again. Flower burial ground slashed down, and killing intent filled the sky. Ji Qiuyu and the great white mansion lord's expression changed slightly. They quickly moved forward to help. However, the saber light was unstoppable. Demonic Butterfly's left hand stopped the enemy while her right hand used the flower burial ground. Tu Li Zun blocked the attack in haste, and a broken arm flew up and slashed across his chest. Blood splattered all over the sky. Ugh! Tu Li Zun was heavily injured and his clothes were dyed red. He took a few steps back and vomited blood. At the same time, Ji Qiuyu and the chief of Tai Bai Mansion had arrived to help. The force of their palms and the edge of their swords were threatening to kill. The demonic butterfly raised its primordial energy to block 2 attacks. Suddenly, it felt its true chi stagnate, its primordial energy was not flowing smoothly, and its moves were already 30% weaker. The next moment, the palm, the sword, and the saber clashed. Butterfly retreated a few steps, her mouth red. Butterfly in the flower, your foolish struggle is useless. Put down the blade in your hand and perhaps we can spare your life. Ji Qiuyu coldly snorted. Stop dreaming. The demonic butterfly wiped away the blood from the corners of her lips. She took a step forward and forcefully summoned the last of her essence. Her meridians surged in reverse, and a terrifying pressure swept outwards. She was prepared for a life or death struggle. When Ji Qiuyu and the Great White Prefecture's mansion masters saw this, their expressions turned grave. The final sound of the battle arrived. The three of them raised their cultivation to the peak of their lives. The three-colored brilliance illuminated the heaven and earth, and shook 1,000-li dance of the butterflies, spring and autumn. The two sabers rotated, and the spring and autumn obelisk gathered the last of their primordial energy into their hands. In an instant, killing intent surged in all directions. Red waves of blood surged out, and two rainbows slashed towards the two venerables. Before the final move, the Great White Prefecture's mansion master turned his sword. Vast primordial energy circulated, and the heaven and earth's spiritual energy supported him. Great White's unique skill reappeared in the world. The path of the mortal world, one absolute move. The path sword shook the blood waves, and the wind and clouds fell from the 9 heavens. The Great White Prefecture's mansion master's mouth was dyed red, and he was forced back a dozen steps. On the other side, Ji Qiuyu also found it difficult to block the final destructive power. She was forced back a dozen feet, and blood fell like rain. Ah! After the final move, the demonic butterfly's figure suddenly staggered. The 3 karmic killing poison burst out. The saber god, who had lost the protection of his primordial energy, was in imminent danger. Butterfly in the flower, you're finished. Ji Qiuyu forcefully suppressed her injuries. She stepped forward, and her slender hand turned into a sharp blade. With the poison in her body, the demonic butterfly's life force was quickly draining away. However, she knew that if she lost here, it would be farewell forever. The saber god barely summoned some strength to block the killing move. With a violent tremor, the blood-stained blue robe flew out. She took advantage of the momentum and quickly retreated. If you want to step out of the death calamity, you have to ask if the path sword in my hand is willing to do so. The Great White Prefecture's mansion master's expression turned cold. He rushed forward, and the sword pierced 3 inches into the demonic butterfly's body. The demonic butterfly let out a muffled groan. The saber god's mansion master blocked the sword that was threatening to kill her. The butterfly in the flower will not fall here. If I want to live, no one can stop me. The demonic butterfly's eyes flashed with a hint of ruthlessness. She ignored the saber god's mansion master and stepped forward. With a piercing sound, the saber god's mansion master was forced to retreat. The path sword was restrained, and the Great White Prefecture's mansion master was unable to counterattack in time. The demonic butterfly did not miss this opportunity. She summoned the dragon gate, stepped into it, and disappeared. The battle ended. The 9 heavens were dyed red with blood. The collapsed void gradually recovered. This was the most tragic battle in 100 years. The 3 venerables joined forces, but they were still defeated on the verge of success. The 4 regions were shocked. Pfft! In the silent battle, the Great White Prefecture's mansion master and Ji Qiuyu both vomited blood. Their expressions were unusually dark. They could not keep this woman here. If they met again in the future, she would be even more difficult to deal with. In the homeland of West Buddha, the female supreme who had watched this shocking battle waved her hand to disperse the screen of light. She looked at knowing Destiny, who had been sleeping on the stone platform for 3 years, and sighed inside. This person had deliberately avoided owing favors his entire life. However, the heavens always played tricks on people. The more unwilling they were, the more they would not get what they wanted. Outsiders saw him as cold and heartless, but he was willing to give everything to the people around him. Putting himself in their shoes, he owed more and more favors. People had to be a little foolish. Treating people with sincerity would be treated with sincerity. How much lifespan does his body have left? The female supreme asked after coming back to her senses. Less than 10 years, the female supreme said softly. In order to stop the Nether King from destroying the world, knowing Destiny borrowed time from the heavens to form his foundation. This body did not have much lifespan left. Also, in order to cultivate the life scroll again, the flow of time was clearly faster than outside. He cultivated for 10 years in the forbidden lands of Changling. His lifespan was consumed again. Now, he was a lamp without oil. Hearing this, the female supreme fell silent. A long time later, she said, "Think of a way to extend his life. At least, before he completes his last wish, do not let this body become a burden to his other two avatars. Lifespan is determined by the heavens. It is difficult to change it." The female supreme sighed softly. Now, he had not lost his life due to serious injuries, but his lifespan was exhausted. The cycle of life and death was the most difficult to reverse. Extending a person's lifespan was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Try to think of a way. If there is no other way, seal this body and forever suppress it under Changling's destiny, the female supreme said. The female supreme stilled and then sighed. This was the only way. The matter of the butterfly and the flower cannot be delayed. I will go to the divine lands. Changling will be in your hands, the female supreme said. Do not worry. The female supreme nodded. After giving instructions, the female supreme did not linger. In the five-colored light, the dragon gate appeared. She entered it and headed east. On West Jade Mountain, two beautiful figures walked down the mountain. One was dressed in Buddhist robes, the other in green robes. The Buddhist robes were flawless, and the woman's face was delicate. Her long hair was tied behind her back. She was not stunning, but she gave people an indescribable feeling. She was calm and peaceful, without the pressure of a cultivator. The eldest senior sister on the mountain, Bai Lingling, was also the first disciple to come up the mountain. Her talent was not as good as the junior sisters who came up the mountain later, and could not compare to the monstrous woman who was ranked third. However, the strongest person on the mountain was still the eldest senior sister because of her calm heart. In comparison, the most terrifying third senior sister on the mountain was the third senior sister. Although her strength was second, she was the person who disliked cultivation the most. Qing Ning, why did you come to the homeland of West Buddha? Bai Lingling asked. Every disciple on the mountain liked this little junior sister who came up the mountain last. She did not speak much, but was the most diligent. She learned from her master that her little junior sister came from the distant eastern domain, the forbidden land where the gods descended. To find someone, Qing Ning replied. Someone you like? Bai Lingling asked. Qing Ning shook her head gently and said, family. The word like was too heavy for them. Ever since he entered the summer palace and she brought him to the empress, they were family. Did you find him? Bai Lingling asked again. No, he has his own things to do. Now is not the time to meet him, Qing Ning replied. In the endless void, there was a floating land. An ancient and majestic palace sat on top of it. It had been tens of thousands of years. Inside the palace, Zhi Ming was still trying his best to find the immortal. Jiang Li followed him, and it became quieter and quieter. The two of them walked for another 3 days. During this time, they encountered a lot of trouble. One time, because they lost their bearings, they accidentally entered a killing formation and almost died. During these 3 days, the 100-flower pills poison flared up more and more frequently in Jiang Li's body. Every time the poison flared up, his injuries became more serious. Ning Chen still did not detoxify him. His heart was made of iron and stone, and he was not merciful at all. He had already experienced the hostility of the realm beyond heaven toward the inner realm. At this critical moment, he could not afford to make any mistakes. He did not want to regret it for the rest of his life because of a moment of soft-heartedness. Jiang Li was also aware of their current situation. He suppressed the hatred in his heart and secretly searched for a way out. Finally, on the 6th day since the two of them arrived, a ray of light appeared in the palace that was filled with killing intent. At the end of the path, heaven and earth changed. A world within a world appeared before them. It was not very big, and there was only one celestial mountain. It was as if a powerful cultivator had moved it here from somewhere else. Even though the space around it had withered over the years, the celestial mountain in the center still maintained an immortal vitality. The two of them stopped in front of the celestial mountain and looked at the peach tree beside the lake. Their eyes shone with a dazzling brilliance. This is the Jade Lake, and the undying peach tree. The lake water had already dried up, but they could still feel the vitality of the peach tree. It was as vast as the sea, and it was shocking. According to the legends, there was a celestial mountain in the celestial world. There was a peach tree in front of the mountain that was irrigated by the Jade Lake's water. It bloomed once every 3,000 years, bore fruit once every 3,000 years, and ripened once every 3,000 years. When the fruit ripened, it could seize the fortune of heaven and earth and reverse reincarnation. It could revive the dead and regrow flesh and bones. However, legends were just legends. No one expected that the undying peach tree really existed. Jiang Li recovered from his shock and looked at the man beside him. He had found the undying peach tree. However, without the Jade Lake's water and 9,000 years of time, how could he bring that woman back to life? Chapter 5:19. With the undying peach tree in front of him, Ning Chen walked over step by step. There was nothing unusual about his expression. However, his hands were clenched so tightly that they had turned white. It was obvious that he was not as calm as he appeared to be. For more than 10 years, day after day, night after night, the ghost girl's bloody smile as she passed away constantly echoed in his mind. He owed her something that he would never be able to taste in his entire life. Beside the Nacre Lake, the peach tree had been growing for tens of thousands of years. The spirit chi in this small world had dried up, and the peach tree had fed it back, barely allowing this small world to survive until today. However, several parts of the immortal peach tree's branches could be seen withering. Perhaps if he had come 100 years later, the undying immortality peach tree would have withered completely. Ning Chen stood under the tree for a long time. He touched the trunk of the peach tree with his right hand and felt the spiritual energy of life in it. He was speechless. Such an astonishing concentration of life force was truly not something that any great medicine in the mortal world could compare to. However, in order to water this tree, one would need the water of the Jade Lake, which was hard to find in the mortal world. The Jasper Lake had already dried up, so where was he going to find Jasper Lake water? Phoenix blood might be able to replace it, but his spiritual energy was like a cup of water on a burning cart of firewood to this tree. It wouldn't be of any use. Have you thought of a way? This world isn't far from its collapse, and this tree will quickly wither and die if it stays here. So, instead of wasting time here, it's better to think of a way to leave this place and transplant the peach of immortality tree to a suitable place to grow, Jiang Li suggested. Ning Chen was silent. After a long time, he came to his senses. He flipped his palm, condensed nascent energy, and slammed it down onto the ground in front of him. Rumbling sounds could be heard as the ground started to crack. The phoenix appeared and opened its mouth. A powerful suction force appeared and sucked the immortality peach tree into the phoenix's body. The divine tree was taken away. Inside the small world, heaven and earth shook violently, showing signs of collapse. Go! Ning Chen called out to Jiang Li, and then he swiftly walked out of the pocket world. Jiang Li followed after him, and a strange look flashed across his eyes. Had this person finally regained his rationality and was thinking of a way to get out? The two of them retraced their steps, and not long after they stepped out of the small world, the heavens and earth behind them collapsed and were completely obliterated in the passage of time. After walking out of the small world, the two of them were presented with two paths. They could either return to where they came from, or they could continue forward and finish the rest of the journey. Jiang Li naturally advocated going back the way they came. She had already personally experienced the dangers of Immortal Palace. If she continued, she didn't know when she would lose her life. Unfortunately, the decision was not in her hands. Ning Chen chose to continue moving forward. The appearance of the immortality peach tree made him even more determined to find the celestial realm. If the legends were true, then the existence of the celestial realm might not necessarily be a myth. At the very least, he had to try to find the origin of the myths and legends. For example, the water of the Jade Lake and the immortal peach tree. A mortal could not wait for 9,000 years. The headmaster had surpassed the pinnacle of cultivation in the mortal world, but he had managed to survive for more than 1,000 years. The immortal peach tree alone could not save the ghost lady. He needed the water of the jade pool, but he also needed time. In the inner realm, in the eastern divine land, the void swirled and the female supreme walked out. She looked at the land that was gradually recovering after the divine tribulation, and her expression was inexplicably complicated. It was hard to imagine what kind of calamity would have happened if the god-sending battle had failed and the Nether King had stepped in to pull the four regions back. However, the cultivators of the divine land who had saved the mortal world in the past had suffered too much karma. The continuous disasters made people sigh. In the imperial city of the Great Xia, in the manor of the Marquis of Jiming. Although the Marquis had left, the manor of the Marquis of Jiming remained. After the end of the Divine War, the manor of the Marquis of Jiming supported the entire Great Xia. The manor of the Marquis of Jiming had become the spiritual pillar of the Great Xia. Even if the Marquis was not there, the manor of the Great Xia could not be shaken. Ning Shi would occasionally come back to stay for a few days, and then she would go to the southern border again. Like the most ordinary woman, she would quietly accompany her husband. In the north of the Great Xia, after Kong Yu was made a Marquis, he rarely came back. He remembered the teachings of the Marquis and tried his best to protect the territory of the Great Xia behind him. The legend of the Marquis of Jiming continued. Just like the Marquis of Triumphant Return and the Marquis of Bloodrobed had done their best to support the Marquis of Jiming. The inheritance had never been broken. Above the imperial city, the Dragon Gate appeared and the female supreme appeared. She glanced at the manor of the Marquis of Jiming below and then flew toward the northwest. It was raining during the Qingming festival. In the northwest of the imperial city, in front of the Zhangsun mausoleum, the legend stood quietly. Not far away, Xia Qi and Xia Xinyu accompanied him to sweep the tomb. The light rain fell on the body, making it slightly cold. The legend of the Great Xia stood quietly in front of the tomb as if he didn't feel it. He stood there for several hours. Just then, not far away, a ray of light gathered and a beautiful figure walked out. Unparalleled pressure shocked the two people present. Xia Qi's expression turned serious. Just as he was about to stand in front of her, he was stopped by Xia Xinyu. You are now the Empress of the Great Xia. Your life represents not only yourself. Don't put yourself in danger so easily. Xia Xinyu scolded softly. Then she looked away and said to the woman in front of her, Miss, may I ask why you are here? I'm here to see the legend of the Great Xia, the female supreme said calmly. Miss, please wait a moment. Uncle won't see anyone now, Xia Xinyu said politely. Okay. The female supreme nodded in response. The light rain in front of the tomb soaked the robes of the legend. King Yan of the Great Xia, who had pursued the pinnacle of the sword all his life, loved the sword, searched for the sword, and proved the sword. However, when had the heart of a swordsman been moved by the world of mortals? Time did not leave a mark on the face of the legend. His young and handsome face had not changed at all, just like 30 years ago. The world of mortals was far away. All that was left was the one on the sword. Time only left a name, not mercy. With the sound of the sword, the legend turned around and looked at the woman waiting patiently not far away. He said, I've waited for a long time. What is your name? Changling, Nucheng, the female supreme replied. Hearing this, a strange look appeared in King Yan's eyes. The homeland of West Buddha, the female supreme of Changling. In other words, the person who had saved that boy 13 years ago was the woman in front of him. I will remember Female Supreme's kindness of saving my junior's life. If you have any requests, Female Supreme can speak directly, King Yen said calmly. He has returned the favor. I'm here for another matter, the Female Supreme said. Oh. Please speak clearly, King Yen said. Blade god Hua Zhongdia of Central Plains fought against all the sects in the world for Jiming Marquis and was seriously injured. Now, she may be targeted by those two from Shen Palace and Yao Temple. Her life may be in danger at any time, the Female Supreme said with a serious expression. Where is Ning Chen? Why did he not help? King Yen frowned slightly and asked. 3 years ago, he was forced into the Demon Will See by the Central Plains sects and has not come out since, the Female Supreme said with a sigh. Hearing this, King Yan's calm expression immediately turned cold. Very good. Just as the legend and the Female Supreme were meeting, the two people who had walked for several days in the Immortal Palace in the void gradually reached a dead end. The deeper they went, the darker it became. The Immortal Palace seemed to have reached the end. Looking up, it was dark and silent. Suddenly, the Immortal Palace started to shake violently again, even more violently than the time they had felt in the void. Amidst the shaking, 3 dragon corpses appeared nearby. In the divine light, the Immortal Palanquin arrived, causing the void to tremble. Immortal Corpse Patrol. This was the first time Jiang Li had seen it with his own eyes. His body trembled violently. It turned out that the divine light they had seen in the void was the trace of the Immortal Corpse Patrol. Get out of the way, don't block the way. Ning Chen reminded and quickly made a path. The scene of the ghost soldiers was still vivid in his mind. The Immortal Corpse Patrol was even more terrifying than the Grim Reaper. They could not provoke it. Hearing Ning Chen's words, Jiang Li came back to his senses and immediately moved out of the way without thinking. The next moment, the dragon corpses opened the way and the palanquin moved forward, leaving in front of the two people. Looking at the palanquin, Ning Chen did not hesitate. He stepped forward and quickly followed it. Maybe the place the Immortal Corpse Patrol went to could answer the question in his heart. Seeing Ning Chen move, Jiang Li immediately followed and quickly chased after him. In front of them, the 3 dragon corpses broke through layers of the void and moved faster and faster. Behind them, the two people were gradually pulled apart and were about to lose them again. Hold on to me. With a shout, Ning Chen transformed into a phoenix and moved at extreme speed. The phoenix spread its wings and disappeared in the blink of an eye. The void rolled and the Immortal Corpse Patrol entered. Before the void closed, the phoenix rushed in and did not pull away. The changes in the world became more and more frequent. The great cultivators of the immortal domain had opened up many unknown worlds. However, the entrances were unknown and difficult to enter. In just a few breaths of time, the Immortal Corpse Patrol passed through layers of worlds and brought the two of them to see too much scenery that they had never seen before. Although it was just a moment, it was enough to remember for a lifetime. Just as the last world disappeared, the reflection of an unknown number of years ago appeared in the world. In the immortal domain that was gradually collapsing, a white-clothed figure stood there quietly. He raised his head and looked at the collapsing void in the sky silently. Immortal. Such a clear feeling, there was no doubt. Ning Chen's pupils shrank fiercely. At this moment, he no longer had any doubts. Strong, so strong that it made him feel like he was facing the Nether King again. However, the silence of that white-clothed figure was so heavy that it made it hard for him to breathe. In the blink of an eye, the two of them were already in an unfamiliar starry sky. It was a beautiful star field with countless nebulas. It was a dazzling rainbow that made people intoxicated. Ning Chen's expression changed. This was the heavens beyond the heavens. In this star field, there was a bright star that was so dazzling. When Jiang Li saw it, she became excited. It was Spirit Void. Now that we've left the immortal domain, it's time for you to fulfill your promise. Jiang Li suppressed her excitement. The phoenix transformed into a red-clothed figure. With a flip of her hand, a violet medicinal pill appeared and flew toward Ning Chen. The antidote, said Ning Chen calmly. Jiang Li took the medicinal pill and swallowed it. Then she circulated her cultivation technique to activate the medicinal energy. The antidote was real. In the blink of an eye, the majority of the 100 flowers' poison had dispersed. The remaining poison was also slowly disappearing under the medicinal energy. Miss Jiang, thank you for accompanying me these days. If fate allows it, we'll meet again. Ning Chen glanced at the palanquin in front of him. Without wasting any more time, he quickly chased after it. Tell me your name, said Jiang Li loudly. Bai Yujing. Chapter 520. In the homeland of West Buddha, in the ancient land of Changling, space shook and light gathered. The female supreme who had gone to the eastern domain had returned. Not far from the stone platform where Su Yi was sleeping, the female supreme leader opened her eyes and looked at the figure in the air. She said, "How is it, did you invite her?" "Yes." The female supreme leader nodded and said, "The legend of Xia has gone to Central Plains. I was worried that the demon Buddha and the purple heavenly palace would do something, so I came back first. They have not done anything. However, with Ji Yuan's appearance, they cannot keep silent. If this woman was not related to the knowing Ming Marquis, I think that even you and I would not be tempted," the female supreme leader said. "There are things to do and things not to do. Since he kept his promise and did not hesitate to give up his life and freedom, we cannot do anything to disappoint him," the female supreme said. The female supreme leader sighed softly and looked at the sleeping figure on the stone platform. She said, "His body is losing life faster and faster. Make a decision quickly and suppress it under Changling's destiny. Then we can ensure that the other two bodies will not be affected." Hearing this, the female supreme's expression turned serious. She said, "Wait a little longer. Unless it is absolutely necessary, we cannot choose this method. We cannot wait. The speed at which his life is dissipating is out of our expectations. Once his life soul starts to dissipate, it will be too late," the female supreme leader said. "I will think of a way. You have just reached perfection. The most important thing now is to stabilize your cultivation. Do not let his sacrifice be in vain," the female supreme said gravely. "I understand, this matter is not easy, but we have to do our best. While Changling and the female supreme are taboos in the homeland of West Buddha, we cannot be ungrateful for what we should do. Changling has restricted his freedom, we cannot take his life," the female supreme said seriously. The female supreme nodded and agreed. His promise to her was to help her avatar reach perfection. Now, he had done it. He gave up his body to help the female supreme level. However, none of them had expected that the time imbalance in the Forbidden Lands would speed up the loss of knowing Ming's lifespan. After his body was taken away, he was unconscious for 3 years and his life grew weaker. It was a fair trade. He gave back his freedom, but not his life. Changling was not good at strange arts. If she wanted to extend knowing Ming's life, she had to find another way. Perhaps, after dealing with the butterfly in the flower, she would need to make a trip to the northern plains. In the outer heavens, the immortal corpse cruised through the starry sky like a shooting star, disappearing in the blink of an eye. Behind them, the phoenix spread its wings and chased after them, flying towards the depths of the cosmos. Perhaps he would never be able to return to the human world after he left. However, the wandering immortal corpse was the closest existence to immortality that the knowing destiny state's eyes had seen. Perhaps the place where the immortal pride was going had the answer he had been looking for. The galaxy was vast and had witnessed the passage of time. The speed of the 3 dragon corpses had reached the pinnacle of heaven and earth. Even the phoenix with its extreme speed could barely catch up to them. That is, Phoenix. When the dragon corpse and phoenix that were chasing after each other flew over a large planet with life, some of the top human experts of the three disasters saw them. They took a step forward and directly flew up into the sky. However, the dragon corpse and the phoenix were too fast. In the blink of an eye, they had already disappeared into the distance. No one knew how long they chased. Perhaps it was a month, perhaps 2 months, or perhaps a year. In the starry sky, there was no distinction between day and night. The sedan did not stop and the phoenix did not stop. They continued to fly towards the depths of the cosmos. Just when Ningchen thought that the chase would continue forever, the sedan stopped for the first time in front of a barren large planet and landed on it. In the tinkling sound, ghost energy filled the sedan. A beautiful figure in a red wedding dress walked out. Her head was covered with a red veil. The familiar aura was shocking. Behind her, the phoenix transformed and Ningchen appeared. When he saw the woman who walked out of the sedan, his body shook violently. His heart was in turmoil. It was the ghost woman. She was not the previous Rakshasa, nor was she an illusory mirror image. The aura was exactly the same. She was undoubtedly the ghost woman. Perhaps one day, the knowing destiny state would not recognize him, but he would never mistake the most beautiful figure in his memory. People would only know the depth of the pain when they were deeply hurt. At the same time, above Zhongzhou, the wind and clouds changed. A legendary battle pet warrior came in person and walked across Zhongzhou unhurriedly. Dressed in green, with black hair and a cold face, King Yan of the Great Xia came alone. He was not here to compete or to prove his swordsmanship, but to seek justice for his juniors. He did not care about the fights between his peers. He could also ignore the bullying of the younger generation. People needed to be trained to grow faster. However, the sects of Zhongzhou had gone too far. Because of an illusory prophecy, they gathered the power of the world to deal with a young man who had once risked his life for the human world. Did they really think that there were no seniors after the knowing destiny state? The wind blew, and the wind whistled. The strongest sword in the divine land came with a murderous aura to deal with the sects of Zhongzhou. Half a day later, in the Tuli ancient realm, a secret place protected by layers of formations, the wind blew. The man in green walked over steadily. Before he arrived, the sword intent had already passed through the cold wind and broken the protective formation. The formation dispersed. The man passed by without stopping for a moment. In the depths of the ancient realm, after the battle with the demonic butterflies, Tuli sensed that the formation outside had been broken. His expression sank. He flashed and blocked the intruder. "Who are you? How dare you trespass in the Tuli ancient realm," said Tuli coldly. "King Yan of the Great Xia." The legendary battle pet warrior waved his hand and a sword rack appeared not far away. The 5 swords all had different auras, but they were all extremely powerful. "There's no need to talk nonsense. If you don't die in 3 moves, I'll kill myself." The legendary battle pet warrior of the Great Xia clenched his right hand and the sword rack trembled. A bone-chilling coldness spread. He unsheathed his green sword, freezing everything within 100 miles. How arrogant! Tuli's expression turned cold. He took a step forward and jumped into the air. Yuan condensed in his left hand, and black mist rolled like waves. He slammed his palm down with the force of the heavens. The first move was as powerful as a mountain. The ancient realm shook. The legendary battle pet warrior did not move under the might of the heavens. The green sword's cold chi surged and condensed the air. The sword and palm collided. The most accurate sword in the world broke through the black mist and dyed it red. The sword intent entered Tuli's body and he groaned. Blood dripped from the corner of his mouth. Tuli extermination, Skyfall. Tuli's expression turned ferocious. He ignored the sword that had pierced his hand and gathered evil chi in his palm. The force of the Skyfall increased by several times. The second move was as powerful as the sky. The legendary battle pet warrior let go of the sword and condensed yuan. Sword mastery revolved around him and turned into an invisible sword. He cut off the arm and blood splashed everywhere. Ugh! Tuli's left arm was cut off and his palms stopped moving. It was too late for him to stop. He was still approaching the legendary battle pet warrior. The third move was as powerful as the wind. The sword passed and the wind stopped. The last scene was reflected in his eyes. The green sword flew back into the legendary battle pet warrior's hand. The moment the two moves changed, the green robe disappeared and the sword went for the throat. Impossible! The legendary battle pet warrior was in disbelief. Before he could close his eyes, his head flew into the air and blood splashed everywhere. Was it fortunate or unfortunate that he could see the only one on the sword? Tuli Zun had a mouth, but he couldn't say anything else. Clang! The sword returned to its scabbard. The legendary battle pet warrior waved his hand and left. Chapter 521. At the foot of the mountain, within the demon-subduing pagoda, the white-haired sub-hoodie sat in meditation, sweat dripping from his forehead. Faintly discernible devil chi spun around him, powerful and evil. The most evil devil chi and the most sacred Buddhist energy clashed, causing sub-hoodie's body to experience the test of Buddha and devil reincarnation. In his mind, a fierce battle was taking place, one that could destroy heaven and earth. It had already lasted for several hours. The white-haired sub-hoodie and the black-haired heart demon came from the same source, but they were completely different. Venerable sub-hoodie and ghost sub-hoodie fought fiercely with their two senses. You want to kill me? Difficult. Ghost sub-hoodie circulated, pushing away the Buddha. The prayer beads in his hand had turned into 108 skulls at some point. Devil chi filled the sky, shocking everyone. Calamity and sin, Buddha cannot tolerate it. Venerable sub-hoodie raised the prayer beads and praised virtue. His Buddhist energy soared, wanting to sever the sin and restore his mind. I am you. Killing me is equivalent to immolating yourself. Ghost sub-hoodie raised the skull prayer beads in his hand, and a vast devil chi covered the illusory world. Its terrifying power shocked even gods and Buddhas. Sub-hoodie heart meditation, Buddhism is boundless. Venerable sub-hoodie's expression didn't change in the face of the devil chi. He gently twisted his fingers, and the swastika spread out. Within the devil chi, Buddhist light rose, and a golden Buddha world appeared. The Buddha and devil chi intertwined, and the Bodhi Buddhist beads and skull devil beads intertwined. The Buddha and devil chi intertwined, creating the most intense battle. Sub-hoodie's thought, forgive and sever sin. Venerable sub-hoodie gently twisted his fingers, and his Buddhist energy turned into a sin-severing weapon. Clear saint energy gathered and cut through everything. With a bang, ghost sub-hoodie retreated several steps. There was no fear in his demonized expression. He let out a piercing sneer, and his devil chi appeared. 6 calamities, blood, sin, hell. The Buddha world's hell appeared, and blood sins filled the air. The terrifying demon realm caused the Buddha world to gradually become unstable, showing signs of collapse. Seeing this, Venerable sub-hoodie flipped his hands, and a vast amount of Buddhist energy rushed into the sky, stabilizing the collapsing Buddha world. Hee hee. The demon laughed foolishly, his ghostly state emotionless. Under the black Buddhist robe, his cold and arrogant face was emotionless. In the next moment, the demon's shadow disappeared and appeared in front of the Buddha. With a bang, a palm shot out. The battle began again, and the killing intent became even stronger. Sub-hoodie flipped his palm to meet the attack. The prayer beads swayed, and the Buddha energy praised the momentum, fighting the demonic thoughts again. As the two moves collided, waves of air surged. The increasingly heavy palms landed on the Buddha demon's body one after another, causing the wind and clouds to go wild. It was a battle that was beyond one's understanding. The Buddha and the devil were fighting. Under the light of the green lamp, the Bodhi-dharma form actually showed signs of cracking. Buddha energy and demonic chi surged, filling the entire demon-subduing pagoda. The 108 bodhisattva statues in the pagoda shone with golden light, aiding the Buddha energy and suppressing the demonic chi. Within the illusory realm, under the influence of the demon-subduing pagoda, the stalemate between the Buddha and the demon-subduing pagoda began to tilt. Bodhi heart meditation, attaining Bodhi with a single thought. With the addition of the demon-subduing pagoda's power, Subhuti started to use the Buddha's sacred technique. A huge golden swastika appeared under him. Subhuti attaining the great Tao, its brilliance illuminated the mortal world, and the holy light purified the world, enveloping the entire world of Buddhism. The illusory realm continued to collapse. Subhuti attaining the great Tao surpassed the limit, drowning the demonic bodies and suppressing the demonic thoughts. Outside the illusory realm, the green lamp suddenly jumped. Subhuti's mind returned to normal. Suddenly, he spat out a mouthful of blood, dyeing the green bricks in front of him red. In the end, the Buddha temporarily suppressed the demon in the battle between the Buddha and the demon. However, the Buddha's white hair was still dyed black. With sin on his body, how could he be as clean as before? At the same time, in Zhongzhou, the news about Tu Li's death quickly spread to all the sections. For a moment, the world was shocked. In Tianji City, 7 youths deduced day and night. Finally, on the third day, they traced the identity of the swordsman and immediately sent someone to inform all the sections. In the divine land of the eastern region, there was only one on the sword. It was King Yan of the Great Xia. In Taibai Prefecture, the lord of Taibai Prefecture pondered for a long time. Then, he got up and wrote a letter. Immediately, he sent someone to deliver it. 2 days later, the announcement that the lord of Taibai Prefecture wanted to challenge the legend of Xia Kingdom to a battle at the Sky Moon Peak spread throughout Zhongzhou. Instantly, the whole region was in an uproar. The lord of Taibai Prefecture was one of the strongest among the human supremes. In the Battle of Zhao family, the reason why the demonic butterfly was severely injured was not only because of supremacy Tu Li's poison, but also because of the existence of the lord of Taibai Prefecture. The time specified in the letter was 10 days later on the Sky Moon Peak. They would have a life-and-death battle to end all the grudges. On the second day after the news spread, a sword light cut through the sky. It was so shocking that it could be seen from thousands of miles away. I'll accept it. The legend of Xia Kingdom replied and accepted the challenge from the top supreme of Zhongzhou. The most powerful sword in the divine land had surpassed the peak of the human supremes. He was also the leader of the Knowing Destiny sword. If the Knowing Destiny sword was the top of the sword, then there was another sword above the top, the only sword above the top. Zhongzhou didn't see any sword above the top in Zhongzhou. In Tianfu Mountain, the homeland of Western Buddha, Buddhist reign fell. Light Zun appeared. The Lord of Jing Feng Pavilion, the Lord of Discipline Pavilion, and the other cultivators of Tianfu Mountain greeted him respectfully. 3 years ago, the Red Demon was the Knowing Destiny Marquis of the Xia Kingdom? Light Zun asked calmly. Yes, Lord Jing Feng Pavilion said respectfully. Why didn't you report it? Light Zun asked again. Killing demons is the same, Lord Jing Feng Pavilion replied. The savior of the world is not the source of the disaster. Tianfu Mountain has made a mistake and it has caused regret. We can't make the same mistake again. Light Zun turned around and looked at the monk beside him. He said calmly, Lord of Discipline Pavilion, you go down the mountain to Zhongzhou today and try your best to resolve this grudge. Yes. Lord of Discipline Pavilion said respectfully. After giving his instructions, the light reverence figure disappeared in the blink of an eye. From today on, everyone on Tianfu Mountain, including me, will reflect on their mistakes for 10 years as punishment. Yes, Light Zun. The Buddhist experts bowed respectfully and accepted the order. On an unknown barren planet in the outer sky, Knowing Destiny Marquis looked at the ghost girl in front of him. He couldn't believe what he had just seen. Under the red wedding dress, there was no vitality in her body. There was only ghost chi around her body. She waved her hand and put away the sedan chair. Then she walked forward. Ning Chen came back to his senses. He stepped forward and blocked the path of the ghost girl. He said hurriedly, "Ghost girl, I'm Ning Chen. Don't you recognize me?" However, the beautiful figure didn't stop. Her aura pushed Ning Chen away and she continued to walk forward. Ning Chen steadied himself and looked at the leaving figure. He couldn't figure out why. "Sorry." Ning Chen sighed and moved forward again. He gathered his phoenix essence and activated the yellow spring. He wanted to restrain the ghost girl temporarily. At this moment, the ghost girl stopped and the ghost chi around her surged out. Before the knowing destiny state cultivators could react, they were sent flying again. She was unimaginably powerful. She had even surpassed the human supremes. She was no weaker than knowing destiny Marquis at the peak of half supremes. However, he couldn't even get close to her. The red wedding dress left quickly. It seemed that she didn't want to be caught by knowing destiny Marquis. She disappeared in an instant. Ning Chen staggered a few steps and forced himself to stop. He wanted to chase after her, but he couldn't see any trace of the ghost girl. Ning Chen suppressed the anxiety in his heart when he saw a trace of a human in this unknown barren land. He quickly chased after the ghost lady. Something must have happened that he didn't know. He was very sure that the girl just now was the ghost girl. There was no mistake. But why? Phoenix shadow. In the floating ice coffin, a beautiful figure was sleeping quietly. Her beautiful face was calm and peaceful. It was eternal in an instant. After chasing for a long time, there was still no trace of the ghost girl on the planet. However, there were signs of people coming. The dilapidated palace had been abandoned for an unknown number of years. Ning Chen entered and took a few glances at it. Just as he was about to leave, a powerful palm strike struck him, threatening to take his life. Ning Chen's face turned cold. He took a step and quickly dodged the palm. He looked at the figure that appeared in the palace and said, "Sir, don't you think it's too much to kill me on our first meeting?" A phoenix that walked into a trap. If you have the guts to break into the flirting wolf palace, you must have the courage to accept your fate of death. As he spoke, the flirting wolf appeared. Although the gray-robed young man was young, his aura was extremely powerful. He was already a half-supremes. Ning Chen heard this and squinted his eyes. It was unbelievable that the person in front of him could see through his identity. Suddenly, the gray-robed man moved. In an instant, the flirting wolf showed his sharp claws and attacked again. This is too much. Ning Chen's face darkened. He moved quickly and condensed chi in his sword finger to block the deadly claws. Not bad. The flirting wolf moved again. He was as fast as a flash of light. After images appeared and the claws kept slashing. Seeing that the gray-robed man was aggressive, Ning Chen didn't hold back anymore. He condensed chi in his sword and a red sword intent rose around him. With a ripping sound, the gray-robed man was torn apart. Blood gushed out and dyed the palace red. Humph! The flirting wolf snorted coldly. He waved his hand and a black ancient mirror appeared in the sky. Under its light, it suppressed the void. The gray-robed man appeared in the mirror. The true body of the phoenix appeared. In the stagnant void, Ning Chen squinted his eyes. So, it was the phoenix. Ning Chen's body was restrained and he saw the sharp claws coming at him. He didn't dodge. Instead, he used his sword finger to meet the attack head-on. With a bang, the gray-robed man was pushed back several steps. Suddenly, his figure turned in the air and flew toward the ancient mirror floating in the sky. The green cauldron appeared and smashed down. There was a violent tremor and the ancient mirror cried out. The light instantly became sluggish. Ning Chen swung his hand and the green cauldron fell down. He activated the yellow spring restriction and temporarily sealed the ancient mirror. Then, his figure flashed and he flew back into the battle. Sword against claw, phoenix against flirting wolf. There was no external influence. It was a fair battle. Nirvana. Nirvana's sword light roared and surged. It was incomparably beautiful. Although it had lost its sword, it was still at its peak. It opened up 3,000 feet in the sky and shook the universe. Ah! The sword chi entered the gray-robed man's body and his eyes turned red. Blood gushed out of the gray-robed man's body. He was forced back dozens of steps. Elder brother, avenge me. With one last glance, the gray-robed man's body suddenly exploded. Blood and bones flew everywhere, filling the sky. The gray-robed man's success and failure were all because of greed. Ning Chen looked at the blood and bones in front of him and frowned. That last glance wasn't normal. At the same time, a pair of cold eyes opened at an unknown location. Looking at the distant gray-robed man's palace, the killing intent in his eyes was bone-chilling. Chapter 522. On an unfamiliar planet in the outer heavens, Ning Chen, who had just experienced a huge battle, had been searching the voracious wolf palace for a long time. He wanted to find some clues about this place. The palace was in ruins, and there were only some cultivation techniques and medicinal pills. Ning Chen casually put them away, not paying too much attention to them. The phoenix body was special, and there weren't many cultivation techniques that could be cultivated. Apart from the sun scripture, there were no other cultivation techniques that could be cultivated. Perhaps he could also cultivate the phoenix body's own cultivation technique. Unfortunately, the two phoenixes didn't leave behind any cultivation techniques. Their consciousness had vanished. After searching for a while, Ning Chen found an ancient scroll in an inconspicuous corner. After reading through it, he gained a general understanding of this place. This planet was called the Heavenly Mansion Planet. There was only one land, but it was extremely vast. According to the ancient scroll, a true immortal had appeared on the Heavenly Mansion Planet in the ancient era. However, too much time had passed, and it was impossible to find out. Ning Chen put away the ancient scroll and walked out of the palace. He didn't know why the immortal corpses that had been patrolling for tens of thousands of years would be the ghost woman in the palanquin. However, since the ghost woman had come to this planet, it meant this planet was extraordinary. It was very likely that the answer he had been searching for was here. Furthermore, there was one more thing. The Alcade King didn't have much life left. He needed to do his best to wake him up. This was an expert not weaker than a sovereign. In this unfamiliar outer heavens, he would be a great help to him. After leaving the remote palace of the greedy wolf, it was already 2 days later when Ning Chen found traces of new people. There was an endless stream of people in the ancient city of the Nether Prefecture. Ning Chen walked over and saw the first city he saw after arriving on the Heavenly Mansion Planet. Martial artists could be seen everywhere. Although there weren't many true experts, it still showed that this was a martial place. 400 miles north of the city, a divine treasury has appeared. Everyone, let's go. Suddenly, someone on the street shouted. Soon after, numerous figures could be seen rushing towards the north. It was a spectacular and strange scene, causing everyone to be dumbfounded. Ning Chen pulled back a martial artist not far from him and smiled. Brother, may I ask what a divine treasury is? The martial artist looked at the young man in front of him as if he was looking at a monster. He asked in a strange tone, "You jumped out of a rock?" Ning Chen scratched his head and said, "I came from the south. It's my first day here, so I'm not sure what's going on." From the south? When the martial artist heard this, his expression became much more polite. He chuckled and said, "Brother, you might not know, but this divine treasury is a treasure left behind by an ancient powerhouse. I don't know when it will appear and see the light of day again. Brother, you're really lucky to encounter such a good thing on your first day here." Very rare? Ning Chen asked curiously. Hee hee. The martial artist smiled awkwardly and explained, it's not that strange. In recent years, there have been at least 80 divine treasures that have appeared. No one knows what will appear. If brother is curious, you might as well go and take a look yourself. Even if you don't obtain any treasures, it's good to broaden your horizons. Ning Chen nodded and smiled. Thank you for your reminder, brother. That's exactly what I was thinking. He could tell that this divine treasury was basically a pretense. Although there might really be some rare treasures, the probability was about the same as picking up a large piece of silver while walking. Just as the two of them were talking, 400 miles to the north of the ancient city of Yuzhou, the earth was shaking. Multicolored light was rising, and the strange scene was shocking. The divine treasury was about to appear, and more people were rushing over. Although most people had been deceived by the so-called divine treasury countless times, it still couldn't dispel the desire of ordinary martial artists to reach the heavens in a single step. In the distance, desolate beasts soared into the sky and war chariots bobbed up and down. Powerful figures stood on desolate beasts or war chariots, quietly waiting for the divine treasury to appear. Brother Zi Shao, I didn't expect you to be interested in this divine treasury as well. On the back of a strange beast that looked like a horse and a tiger, a blue-clothed man stood quietly. He looked at the figure on the war chariot and smiled. The divine treasury has no owner. The capable can obtain it. Why can't I come? On the war chariot, the purple-clothed man said calmly. Ah. The blue-clothed man smiled. It's not that you can't. It's just that the Supreme Mystery Palace has never lacked any treasures. Brother Zi Zhao's master is also one of the world's strongest experts. Why do you need to fight over this divine treasury with the descendants of small sects like us? I don't know whether or not the Supreme Mystery Palace lacks treasures, but I do know that the heavenly capital mountain has never been some small sect. Hua Fengyun, a battle of words is useless. If there's a need, let's fight, said the purple-clothed man indifferently. Since Brother Zi Shao has said this, then I can only respectfully accept, said the blue-clothed man. The two of them didn't say anything more. They calmly looked at the divine treasury in the distance. This time, the divine treasury was likely to be something incredible. They couldn't be careless. Boom! Just at this moment, huge cracks appeared on the ground. They spread out dozens of miles. The divine treasury was about to appear. Strange phenomena appeared one after another, and its power became even more shocking. The martial artists waiting outside the light also became nervous. In these past years, the divine treasury had frequently appeared, but there hadn't been many truly useful treasures. They hoped that this time it wouldn't disappoint them. There was another world-shaking tremor, and the ground shook violently. The large crack that split open once again spread out, extending to a distance of 50 kilometers. Such a shocking commotion could only be compared to the appearance of a rare divine treasure more than 10 years ago. What could it be? On the beast's back, Hua Fengyun narrowed his eyes. In the next moment, a terrifying earth flame surged out and soared into the sky. Those who didn't dodge in time were immediately swallowed by the earth flame's extreme heat. They only had time to let out a miserable scream before they were burned to ashes. A rain of fire fell from the sky. Wherever it fell, even the ground began to burn. The earth flame's power was completely displayed. Within the rain of fire, miserable screams rang out one after another. Those who hadn't yet reached the Xiantian realm began to die under this heavenly might. The last violent tremor resounded. The long-awaited divine trove had finally appeared. Lava spewed out, and within the sky-burning waves of fire, a powerful aura appeared, shaking the heavens and earth. In the distance, Hong Yi slowly walked over. Her eyes lit up when she saw the black figure within the lava. She had been unlucky for half her life. This time, she had finally encountered something good. At the same time, in the central plains, the cold moon hung high in the sky. The legendary cultivator heading west suddenly stopped and looked ahead coldly. Since you're here, why are you still sneaking around? Prince Yen waved his hand, and a sword rack flew out and landed on the side. The legendary cultivator of the eastern region's sword really lives up to his name. As he spoke, the void rippled, and one figure after another walked out. Their terrifying auras merged together, covering the sky and the moon. 9 half-exalts and 3 human sovereigns had appeared at the same time. This was the first time the legendary cultivator of the execution sword had teamed up. The battle at the heavenly moon peak was real, but it was also a trap. The words of the human sovereigns were witnessed by the world, and they couldn't go back on their word. However, if the swordsman died on the way and couldn't come as promised, then no one could be blamed. Today, the 3 sects of the Central Plains will meet the legendary cultivator of the Eastern Region's sword. Ji Qiuyu, Li Xiaoran, and Bu Chuanxiu stepped forward. Their auras rose to the extreme. At the same time, the 9 half-exalts formed a formation in groups of 3. Sabers, swords, and halberds formed a path to hell. The strongest formation cut off all paths of retreat. They were determined to end the legendary cultivator of the Eastern Region's sword. The sovereigns teamed up and the 3 sects formed a formation. The legendary cultivator of the Grand Xia had a cold expression on his face. He held the 2 swords on the rack with both hands and slowly pulled them out. The battle had begun. Cold blades shone brightly, and heaven and earth changed. 2 legendary swords against 3 venerables, and the sword moved like flowing clouds breaking through the mortal world. The 2 swords shone brightly in the sky. Each of their moves was at the level of returning to the void. On the other hand, the 3 sects formed a formation in groups of 3. The human sovereigns took the lead and cooperated with the formation to kill the legendary cultivator of the sword. The 3 sects took turns to attack and defend. The blades, swords, and halberds blocked the green and red lights. With the support of the Supreme Being, they cooperated well and had no flaws. The legendary twin swords were actually stalled for a moment. How can the imperial sword be blasphemed? Prince Yen took the opportunity to retreat. He snorted coldly and the 2 swords flew back into the rack. The next moment, the sand sword flew out and an invisible sword light broke through the sky. The sand sword scattered and the sword intent of heaven and earth filled the air. A flaw appeared in the formation of the 3 sections. At this moment, the green robes fluttered, the abyss condensed, and the soul was broken. The 3 half-venerables' weapons were broken, and they died. At this moment, the 3 half-exalts of the Zhao clan who had been hiding in the distance saw the formation collapse. They worked together to activate the Yingyue Heavenly Bow. In an instant, the Yingyue Heavenly Bow was revived. The leader of the 3 sovereigns, Bu Chuanxiu, sensed the awakening of the Zhao clan's Heavenly Bow. He stepped into the sky at the same time and activated his true origin. A rain of black arrows fell from the sky without any warning. They sank 3 feet into the ground. With the help of the human sovereigns, their power was earth-shattering. Prince Yen turned around in the rain of arrows. The green light was extinguished and he avoided the falling arrows. His clothes were torn apart and his hair fell to the ground. A black arrow brushed past the legendary cultivator's face and his hair was dyed red. "You're all dead." The legendary cultivator was furious. He waved his hand and the sword rack shook. The green and red lights turned into rays of light and flew out. At the same time, the sand sword and the Yingyue Heavenly Bow left his hand and the 4 swords flew into the sky. For swords move the world, heaven and earth fall together. It was a world-shaking move that appeared once again in the mortal world. The 4 swords shook the heavens and earth, and boundless sword pressure descended. As the swords passed, the heavens and earth collapsed, and the shattered void brought out pitch-black ravines. Blood and broken limbs flew everywhere. He took out the Zhiga spear and his clothes moved. He waved his sword and disappeared. When he reappeared, a sword light appeared again. Arg! Ji Qiuyu and Li Xiaoran's mouths turned red. They didn't dare to stay any longer and they quickly left. In the sky, Bu Chunqiu frowned and his silhouette faded away. After the battle, the wind was cold and the sky was red. None of the 9 half-exalts survived. The formation of the 3 sects had been defeated. Prince Yen waved his hand and the Zhiga spear returned to its scabbard. At the same time, the other 4 swords also returned to the sword rack. The legendary cultivator put away his swords and continued walking towards the heavenly moon peak. Chapter 523. Outside Yuzhou City, the divine treasury appeared. Fire rained down from the sky, blocking everyone who wanted to get close. Within the flames, the cries of a sparrow could be heard. A divine bird with a fiery red body flew out. It looked like a phoenix, but it was not a phoenix. It looked like Owan, but it was not Owan. Vermilion bird. Everyone present recognized the identity of the divine bird, and their faces were filled with shock. This was a spiritual beast born from the heavens and earth. Although it was not comparable to the legendary 4 symbols deities in ancient times, it was enough to make the strong people in the world go crazy. The divine treasury had no owner, and only the capable could obtain it. The moment the vermilion bird appeared, all the cultivators moved and rushed toward it. Chirp! The vermilion bird cried, unwilling to be bound by humans. It spread its wings and soared into the sky. You want to leave? Do you think it's that easy? At this moment, the strong cultivators who were waiting in the distance moved. Multicolored light danced, and an inescapable net appeared, covering the vermilion bird. Chirp! The vermilion bird cried, and the flames around its body burned. Its terrifying power burned the inescapable net, and it soared into the sky. Oh! On the strange beast and chariot, Zi Xiao and Hua Fengyun narrowed their eyes. What a powerful vermilion bird! The next moment, 2 beams of light rose into the sky and chased after it. They would not give up such a divine treasury to anyone. The 2 figures, one in front and 2 behind, chased for 1,000 miles. The newly born vermilion bird had not fully awakened, so it could not use its full speed. Gradually, the 2 caught up. Zi Xiao stepped forward, and a purple sword appeared. The sword locked the vermilion bird. Hua Fengyun waved his hand, and his saber shone. While trapping the vermilion bird, he was also on guard against Zi Xiao's sword. The saber and sword fought separately, but they were watertight. The vermilion bird's figure stopped moving. So the 2 brothers are already here. Mo Yinglian greets you. When the battle reached a stalemate, a brown-clothed youth appeared in the distance. His steps turned, and his figure flickered several times. In an instant, he arrived at the battlefield. He raised his hand and reached for the vermilion bird trapped by the saber and sword. He wanted to take advantage of this rare opportunity. Humph! Hua Fengyun snorted when he saw the newcomer's movement. His saber changed its momentum, threatening to take away the soul. Clang! Saber and palm collided, and killing intent surged in all directions. Mo Binglian took half a step back, and a smile appeared on his young face. Elder brother, why must you be so angry? Mo Dalan, are you prepared to die for stealing from the Supreme Mystery Palace and Tiande Mountain? Hua Fengyun opened his mouth, intentionally dragging Zi Xiao into this as well. Zi Xiao brandished his sword and blocked the vermilion bird again. After hearing the former's words, he frowned slightly but did not say anything. He focused on dealing with the spirit beast that was becoming more and more powerful. Senior brother, you must be joking. Mo Bing Lan chuckled and said, how could I dare to snatch something from you 2 brothers? I'm only here to lend you a hand. Swish! Just as he finished speaking, a heaven-piercing arrow light silently arrived. It wasn't to kill or injure the enemy, but to break through the purple cloud divine sword that was trapping the vermilion bird. Who is it? Zi Zhao's eyes narrowed. He wanted to attack again, but he saw the arrow lights sweeping over. One after another, they blocked the path of the sword. The vermilion bird saw an opportunity. It faced the sky and let out a long cry before rapidly flying away. The trio's expressions changed and they immediately moved. However, the arrow lights that pierced through the sky howled and rushed forward, blocking their path. Damn it! Who is interfering? Hua Fengyun's expression was extremely ugly as he watched the vermilion bird disappear into the horizon. I don't know. Zi Zhao said, then waved his hand to summon the war chariot and drove it away. Although they didn't know who it was, they could see that the person who attacked just now had no intention of harming them. From this, it could be inferred that this person had no grudges with them and only came for the vermilion bird divine treasure. However, who could such an extraordinary powerhouse be? 3,000 miles away, the vermilion bird galloped faster and faster towards the north. Suddenly, the cry of a phoenix shook the sky. A red-clothed figure appeared and rushed towards the escaping vermilion bird. Phoenix! A shocked voice rang out. The vermilion bird opened its mouth and turned its body, avoiding the sword light. Vermilion bird, sorry for the offense. The red-clothed figure took shape and pointed the sword at Huiyuan. It turned its steps and once again rushed forward. The vermilion bird angrily cried out and flames rose around its body. The momentum of burning the sky annihilated dozens of miles. Very good. If I devour you, I will have a chance to recreate the glory of my ancestors. The vermilion bird stopped running and its aura surged like waves. Its strength kept rising and it faintly broke through the limit of half-step exalts. Ning Chen frowned. His sword became sharper and the vermilion bird's aura became stronger. The longer this battle dragged on, the more unfavorable it would be for him. Clang! Waves of fire spread everywhere. The vermilion bird, whose strength was constantly awakening, gradually evened the battle. It wasn't at a disadvantage. When the battle reached its peak, blood splashed everywhere and injuries appeared on the red-clothed figure. The vermilion bird opened its mouth and swallowed the blood that fell from the former's mouth. In the blink of an eye, a red-clothed figure with black hair appeared. It was like a mirror image, shocking everyone. The wings on the vermilion bird's back hadn't completely disappeared, but its face was exactly the same. There was no difference at all. Seeing this, Ning Chen's expression became serious and the sharpness of his sword increased by 30%. The sword pierced through the heart and a drop of reddish-gold blood flew out. The vermilion bird's figure staggered. At the same time, the red-clothed figure rushed forward and opened the yellow springs, wanting to seal the divine treasury. In that moment of crisis, the vermilion bird's body soared into the sky and burned the yellow springs. Its figure quickly disappeared into the flames. Phoenix, cherish your final moments. The day I remove my wings is the day I replace you. The vermilion bird disappeared, leaving behind a final warning. A moment later, the flames scattered and the vermilion bird disappeared. Ning Chen stopped. Looking at the vermilion bird that had disappeared, he frowned. The vermilion bird's secret technique? Waving his hand, Ning Chen collected the vermilion bird's blood floating in the air. Then, he turned and walked back to Yuzhou City. The vermilion bird divine treasury was far from as simple as he had imagined. He thought he had gotten lucky this time, but it seemed he had been overthinking things. Now that the trivial matters were over, it was time to get down to business. In Yuzhou City, the news of the vermilion bird's appearance had already spread like wildfire. In Tiande Mountain, the scene of the Supreme Mystery Palace's successor attacking had also been seen by some Xiantian powerhouses. Was the vermilion bird captured by Tiande Mountain or the Supreme Mystery Palace? Curiously asked someone. No. In the end, someone interfered and released the vermilion bird, replied a martial artist who had been to the divine treasury. Who was it that dared to snatch something from Tiande Mountain or the Supreme Mystery Palace's successor? I'm not sure. From the beginning to the end, I didn't see that person's figure. However, from the pressure of the arrow, I can confirm that this person is at least not weaker than the successors of the Celestial Capital Mountain and the Supreme Mystery Palace, replied the cultivator. Such an expert actually appeared around Yuzhou City. I really didn't expect that. That's not necessarily true. Right now, the various powers are constantly moving. Perhaps it's the successor of some large power. Have you heard that the Seven Kills Palace's peerless heavenly genius has issued a bounty for a youth with a phoenix bloodline? Oh. Why? It seems that the Ravenous Wolf Palace's master is dead. The murderer is that person. Is that person crazy? Of all the people he could provoke, he had to provoke that madman from the Ravenous Wolf Palace. His elder brother is the most terrifying young expert in the entire Heavenly Mansion planet. He's probably already on the verge of becoming a chosen. Who knows? Since that person dared to kill the Ravenous Wolf Palace's master, perhaps he has some sort of background and isn't afraid of that peerless heavenly genius. What's the point of having a stronger background? That peerless heavenly genius potential is unprecedented. Now that he's matured, even chosen wouldn't dare to lightly offend him. We don't know the whole story, so guessing is useless. Let's just patiently wait for this matter to develop. Sooner or later, the two of them will meet. At that time, we'll know whether there's something wrong with his head or if he really has some skill. Not far away, Ning Chen, who had just returned to Yuzhou City, didn't hear their conversation. He also didn't know about the huge trouble he had provoked. However, even if he knew about it, with his character, he wouldn't be afraid. No matter how strong the peerless heavenly genius of the Seven Murders Palace was, he was only on the verge of becoming a chosen. Even if his battle prowess was comparable to a chosen, so what? He had killed Ravenous Wolf because Ravenous Wolf wanted to kill him. There was no other reason. Not to mention that he hadn't known about the Seven Murders Palace beforehand. Even if he had known, the result would have been the same. As for that person from the Seven Murders Palace, if he could defeat him, then he would fight him. If he couldn't, then he would fight him when he could. The world was vast, and there were countless experts. With only half of his body left, he couldn't be arrogant enough to think that he was invincible. The loneliness of experts was a problem for his seniors. The current him was still very far away from that. In the heavenly moon peak of the central continent, a cold full moon hung high in the sky. Under the moon, a middle-aged man in a white robe with blue patterns stood quietly. His powerful aura caused the space around him to twist. The Taibai Prefecture's master was the strongest chosen in the central continent. Today, he would be meeting a legend in the eastern region. Outside the heavenly moon peak, the experts of the human world were all standing on the peaks, waiting to watch the upcoming battle. Who do you think will win this battle? On a mountain peak, two men stood quietly. One of them asked. Taibai Prefecture's master. The other man answered calmly, no matter how powerful the legend in the eastern region is, he hasn't reached the chosen level yet. Taibai Prefecture's master has been in the chosen level for more than 300 years. His cultivation has already reached the peak of the complete realm. It's as difficult as ascending to heaven for him to go against the chosen level. I thought so too. But now, I'm looking forward to the performance of this legend. 4 years ago, Mo Qingbai's cultivation was destroyed by a swordsman. Chapter 524. Guihong Sky Moon Peak was surrounded by clouds and mist. The moon shone brightly. On the peak, the green-robed man and the blue-robed man stood opposite each other. One was calm and the other was indifferent. The battle was about to begin. The airflow was reversed and the wind and clouds were chaotic. The surrounding peaks were rolling in the void. One by one, the strong cultivators walked out from all directions to witness the battle. Prince Yen of Xia Kingdom, please. On the peak of Sky Moon Peak, a leaf flew down and blocked the eyes of the two. The chief of Taibai Prefecture moved first. He waved his horsetail whisk and the Taoist sword appeared. The sword light broke through the air. The fast sword broke the fallen leaves. In an instant, it was deadly. Clang! The sword finger shook the Taoist sword. The sword will spread. Prince Yen waved his hand and the sword light flew out from the sword rack. The green-red sword passed by each other and swept towards the person in front of him. The legendary sword made a sudden change in the air pressure. The supreme sword broke through the genuine vitality around the Jizun and chased after his soul. The chief of Taibai Prefecture looked serious and stepped back. The horsetail whisk gathered Hao Yuan and wrapped around the green-red sword that was chasing after him. At this moment, the green-robed man moved and the sword arrived. The moment he held the sword momentum split the sky. The sudden change in the power of the sword was shocking. The chief of Taibai Prefecture swept the ground with his horsetail whisk and quickly changed his move. Swoosh! The sword light brushed past his shoulder and broke through the void. The peak in the distance was instantly flattened by several feet. The ground rumbled and shook. Giant rocks fell from the mountain. The power of the sword was shocking. It's hard to say who will win this battle. With just one move, the strong cultivators changed their minds. The legend of the Eastern region swordsman lived up to his name. Sword sound, flying. Before he finished speaking, the battle situation on Sky Moon Peak changed again. The red sword turned around and the green-robed man stepped forward. In the light sound, the sword light was so fast that it was too much for the eyes to follow. The chief of Taibai Prefecture blocked the sword and was hit several times. His blood dyed the sword red. The sword was so precise that there was no mistake. The sword moved at will and blocked the moves with the sword. The chief of Taibai Prefecture was so strong that he couldn't even make a move. There is such a sword in the world. Outside Sky Moon Peak, the people were shocked again. Was the chief of Taibai Prefecture weak? Of course not. How could there be a weak person at the peak of the Jizun? The only explanation was that the legend of the divine prefecture sword was too powerful, so powerful that it was beyond everyone's imagination. Now, the lord of Taibai Prefecture was completely suppressed. He might not even be able to exert half of his strength. Rip! There was another sound of clothes being torn apart. In the battle, the blood from the left arm of the lord of Taibai Prefecture splashed all over the sky. The rhythmic red sword was like a swimming dragon. The sword on the sword displayed the most brilliant style. Unwilling to be restrained, the lord of Taibai Prefecture took the blow head-on. His horsetail whisk gathered heavy vast vital energy and swept out. A cold glint flashed across Prince Yan's eyes. The green sword in his left hand moved first, and the sword sealed the horsetail whisk. At the same time, the red sword in his right hand condensed his essence to help. It directly pierced through Prince Yan's left shoulder. With a muffled groan, the lord of Taibai Prefecture took a few steps back. Blood gushed out from the corners of his mouth and dyed his blue and white clothes red. The unbelievable truth was clearly displayed in front of everyone. The world was shocked. They had originally thought that they were evenly matched, but now, it had become a one-sided absolute suppression. The legend of the swordsman had actually become a legend. He had been observing swords all his life, and only today did he realize that the sword was a sword. In the homeland of West Buddha, in the ancient land of Changling, the female Supreme and female Chang were watching the battle. Their expressions were also filled with unconcealable shock. They all knew that this legend of Great Xia was very strong, but they did not expect him to be this strong. In the past, when the Jiming Marquis talked about the strong people in the world, there were only 3 people who were added below the Supremes. One was the Eternal Night Hierarch, another was Mu Bai of the Barren City, and the last was Prince Yen of Great Xia. She had never seen Mu Bai's sword. The Eternal Night Hierarch was brave and skilled in battle, but in front of the gods, he seemed so insignificant. As for the legends of great Xia who did not participate in the Battle of the Gods, she did not know much. At that time, she thought that the Jiming Marquis had made such an evaluation because when he was weak, his memories of the seniors who protected him were too deep. It was so deep that he could not change this kind of admiration and respect in his life. She did not completely believe Jiming's words, but she did not completely believe them. She once asked if there were any strong people in the world who knew Jiming. No. At that time, Jiming answered her like this: "My sword was taught by Mu Bai and the seniors. The art of double transformation was taught by the Eternal Night Hierarch. Every strong person has his own path, at least the student has to surpass the master. In this life, I have never defeated the three of them. How can I surpass them? How can I be called a strong person? In the end, I am just a warrior. No matter how good I am, if I can't find my own path, I don't deserve to be called a strong person." When he said this, Jiming's tone was calm. He was not modest, nor did he belittle himself. He was just stating a fact. It was also at that time that she realized for the first time that in the eyes of the legends of divine prefecture, a strong person was not just a high level of cultivation. Jiming Marquis might be a monster that they casually taught. Why doesn't the legend of Great Xia prove his sword? Looking at the battle on the Sky Moon Peak, the maiden squinted her eyes and asked in confusion. It's not that he doesn't want to prove it, but that he can't. The maiden sighed and said, to prove his sword, he needs an opponent. In this world, who is qualified to make him prove his sword with all his strength? Even you and I can't do it before we combine our bodies. Masters are lonely. After hearing this, the maiden fell silent. After a while, she said these words softly. It was difficult to find an opponent to compete with. It was lonely at the top. Perhaps this was the reason why the invincible legend of Barren City fought with the deities even though he knew the result. Under the great wish of protecting the world, it was the luckiest thing in his life to have an opponent who could make him prove his sword with all his strength. The Hierarch of Eternal Night, Mu Bai, and Prince Yen of Great Xia. Unfortunately, the world could only see the elegance of one of them. Fortunately, the world could still see the elegance of one of them. Unfortunately, the sword of the legend grew too fast, and it would become stronger and stronger until it could no longer be used. On the Sky Moon Peak in Zhongzhou State, the battle between the legend and the Supreme Master was still going on. Green and red colors intertwined, and the Taoist sword lost its sharpness. The absolute suppression showed the extreme power of the sword. Taibai Jingxing blocked the sword. The more he fought, the more shocked he was. The more he fought, the more injured he was. Once upon a time, he thought that he had reached the top of the world, and the road to immortality was just a step away. Unexpectedly, after today's battle, he realized that he had not reached the top of the road to immortality. The red sword entered his body, and a waterfall of blood splashed out. The chief of Taibai Jingxing retreated a few steps, and the Taoist sword stirred up the wind and clouds, trying to shake off the battle. However, as soon as the Taoist sword moved, the sword aura was penetrated. The green sword flashed, and the ultimate move was sealed instantly. It was an unprecedentedly humiliating battle. Every move was restrained. Before the move was made, the Taoist sword had arrived. It was as if he could predict every move of the enemy, and it was very depressing. At the climax of the battle, the legend who had the absolute advantage suddenly retreated. Looking at the opponent in front of him, he could not hide the disappointment in his eyes. You! The chief of Taibai Jingxing was stunned, and then he was furious. An indescribable humiliation surged in his heart. He shouted in a deep voice, and his hair stood on end. The Taoist sword condensed the vast vital energy around him. In an instant, the wind and clouds in the sky changed. The heavy power attracted the dark clouds to hide the moon. It was very shocking. Outside the Sky Moon Peak, the powerhouses who were watching the battle felt very complicated. Everyone could see that the legend of the swordsman of the eastern region had given up his move, because if he did not, the battle would end in such a boring way. There would be no more waves. No one could believe that a supreme master could be suppressed to such an extent that he could not even use his move. The legend of the invincible supreme master in the human world has been broken. On a mountain in the distance, a man sighed. Since ancient times, the supreme master in the human world had been the symbol of invincibility. Only a supreme master could defeat a supreme master. However, from now on, the supreme master in the human world no longer represented invincibility. Next to him, another man was silent. The truth was always so cruel that it was hard to accept, but it happened in front of their eyes. The gap was very clear. It was the first time that such a sword had appeared in the four regions for thousands of years. The terrifying sword, the terrifying swordsman, and the terrifying divine land of the eastern region. Now it seemed that too many unimaginable things had happened before the deities were sent back. How many such powerhouses were there in the divine land? Under the moon, the battle had reached the final moment. The chief of Taibai Jinxing, who was unwilling to be defeated, rushed all his genuine vital energy into the sword. The powerful pressure was boundless, and the whole sky moon peak was shaking. In front of him, the legend stood quietly with his black hair flying. His eyes were quietly looking at the rising pressure in front of him. There was no change in his calm expression. He had given him a chance to make a move. Now, it was time for him to die. The mortal way is the ultimate sword. Taibai Jinxing's unique skill appeared, and the mortal way appeared. In the terrifying torrent, the Taoist sword cut through the mortal world. The move of proving the way was shocking. The most powerful move had not yet arrived, but the pressure had already arrived. Under the moon, the mountains kept cracking. They could not bear the terrifying pressure, and showed signs of collapse. Under the extreme pressure, the cyan and red in the legend's hand returned to the scabbard and condensed. Circles of black light rose to the extreme, and the space of 100 feet turned into nothingness. One sword forbidden martial arts, no way in the world. In the nothingness, the legend moved his sword, and the forbidden martial arts move appeared in the world again. The next moment, the black light that could swallow the sky and destroy the earth annihilated everything, including the moonlight, the void, and the mortal way sword. Ah! With a painful groan, the chief of Taibai Jinxing stepped back several steps. The Taoist sword in his hand was broken, and his blood spurted into the sky, dyeing the whole sky moon peak red. He was defeated. He was defeated miserably. There was no suspense in his defeat. The chief of Taibai Jinxing fell to the ground. His eyes were dull. He could not understand why. What was the difference in his way? What was the reason for his defeat? Looking at the fallen figure, Prince Yan did not say a word. He quietly walked to the sword rack and put the condensed abyss back. The forbidden martial arts sword was not a sword to take his life. There was no need to kill him. The punishment was not only death. He hoped that this man could reach the peak of martial arts again. Maybe one day, he could stand in front of him again. However, he was too weak now. He was not qualified to prove his sword. On the collapsed sky moon peak, the legend waved his hand and put away the sword rack. There was no joy on his face. When he turned around and left, his lonely figure was so heavy and lonely. Mu Bai, you made my sword lonely for the rest of my life. The dust was flying, and the cold moon was hazy. The lonely master disappeared. Chapter 525. In Yuzhou City, on the second day after the vermilion bird divine treasury appeared, someone from the Tianxiang dynasty arrived. This person was a true big shot, a supreme-level powerhouse. He was one of the top existences in the entire Tianfu planet. Just the two words celestial minister represented everything. Although there weren't many mortal sovereigns on the Tianfu planet, they weren't lacking either. However, there was only one person who could be called celestial minister. Mortal dynasties had left and right ministers. As for celestial minister, he was the celestial minister of the Tianxiang dynasty and the entire Tianfu planet. The arrival of celestial minister had shaken the entire ancient city of Yuzhou. It had been many years since a mortal sovereign had arrived in Yuzhou, let alone a celestial minister. In a tea house in the city, Ning Chen sat quietly, drinking tea while listening to the discussions around him. Celestial minister. It seemed that an extraordinary person was coming to Yuzhou city. Or perhaps he was the crown of civil and martial arts. However, that had nothing to do with him. The most important thing right now was to find a way to wake up the Alcade King. He couldn't change his lifespan. That was the Alcade King's own matter. His mission was to wake him up. It was said that the Alcade King should have died 100 years ago. For him to be able to last until now, he definitely had some method he didn't know of. After waking him up, he wouldn't need to worry about the rest. In terms of saving someone, the Jadoth Holy Land's Jadoth Divine Furnace was the most suitable. Unfortunately, he couldn't return to the 5 regions or Nanling. Ning Chen stood up and paid the bill before walking out of the tea house. If he couldn't find a way to save the Alcade King in Yuzhou City, then he would have to look elsewhere. Sir, please wait a moment. At this moment, a middle-aged man with a smile on his face stood up from the table beside him and spoke. Ning Chen stopped and looked at the middle-aged man. He asked, "Are you talking to me?" "Yes." The middle-aged man nodded and smiled. "This is my first time in Yuzhou City and I'm unfamiliar with the place. I wonder if you could lead the way. As for the reward, please feel free to state it." "Sorry, I've also just arrived. I'm also unfamiliar with the place." Ning Chen politely refused, and then he walked out with large strides. "Celestial Minister, is there something different about this person?" asked a black-clothed girl beside the middle-aged man. "I don't know." The middle-aged man smiled and said, "My intuition tells me that this person isn't simple. You should know that my intuition has always been the most accurate. Then this time, the celestial minister's intuition might be wrong. Although this person's martial aura is somewhat restrained, it can still be seen that he's at most in the 3 disasters realm. It's impossible for him to be any higher." The black-clothed girl said calmly. "Hey, that's not right. When did I ever say that I cared about his cultivation? The Heavenly Mansion star has no lack of martial artists," smiled the middle-aged man. "What did the Heavenly Minister value him for?" The black-clothed girl was puzzled. "Full of dirty water," the middle-aged man replied. When the black-clothed girl heard this, she coldly snorted and said, "Birds of a feather?" "Wrong." The middle-aged man smiled and said, "It's because we appreciate each other." Outside the tea house, Ning Chen turned around to look at the figure in the tea house. His eyes flashed with a strange light. The legendary celestial phenomenon was sitting at a table not far from him, but he did not notice it just now. The reason he was able to guess his identity wasn't because the celestial phenomenon had exposed himself. On the contrary, this person was no different from an ordinary person. The true reason he was suspicious was the black-clothed girl beside him. Of his 3 bodies, the phoenix body's perception was the most sensitive. It far surpassed the devil bodies and his true bodies. That was why he was able to see that this girl was deliberately concealing her aura. At such a young age, she was already close to the peak of the 3 disasters realm. It was too abnormal. For such a strange person to appear when the celestial phenomenon was about to descend, it was too much of a coincidence. He had no interest in the celestial phenomenon's goodwill. The reason was very simple: he didn't like dealing with people who were full of schemes. There was no such thing as appreciation in this world. Most of the time, the same kind of people repelled each other. In the largest pavilion in Yuzhou City, Ning Chen walked over. When he saw the dazzling array of treasures, he couldn't help sighing. No money, still no money. The pavilion had its own rules. There were things that could be bought with gold and silver, but there were even more things that couldn't be bought with gold and silver. To cultivators, spirit jades and immortal sources were the only things that had true value. Immortal sources were things that could only be chanced upon. Spirit jades were second, and they existed in the mortal world. Although they were also precious, they were far inferior to immortal sources. On the platform, Ning Chen looked at the divine weapons with overwhelming spiritual qi. He didn't hide the envy in his eyes. They were all good things, but unfortunately, he couldn't afford any of them. He definitely couldn't use immortal sources casually. The immortal realm was already on the verge of collapse, and the competition tower had a time limit. There were fewer and fewer immortal sources. If he used immortal sources now, it would be too late to regret it when he needed them in the future. How much is this sword? Ning Chen pointed at the worst quality sword on the platform. It had a pretty good appearance. 100 taels of silver, the old man casually replied without even raising his head. Can it be cheaper? Ning Chen haggled. 90 taels, no less. Take it or leave it, said the old man impatiently. I'll take 90 taels. Just as Ning Chen was about to speak, an annoying voice came from not far away. The owner of the voice wasn't very old, only around 16 or 17 years old. He had delicate features and wore luxurious robes made of silver thread. There was no need to ask to see that he was a junior from a large family. Young master, I saw this sword first. Ning Chen turned to the youth walking over and tried to reason with him. You haven't bought it yet, right? I want it. You can buy something else, said the youth. When Ning Chen heard this, his anger rose. He endured it and suppressed the surging true qi in his Ren and Du meridians. He patiently explained, Young master, this sword is the worst among all of them. It only looks good on the surface. With young master's status, you should buy a better sword. The youth didn't believe him. Then why don't you buy something else? I don't have money, said Ning Chen honestly. The young man's mouth twitched, and he had an expression that said, I don't care, this young master wants this sword. Ning Chen clenched his fists. He wanted to slap this fellow to death. What family's junior was this? He was so stupid, but he still had the nerve to come out. The old man selling the sword was drowsy. He didn't pay attention to their argument. Out of sight, out of mind. He was just selling weapons, not a peacemaker. Furthermore, there was something wrong with their heads. He had seen quite a few people fight over divine weapons, but this was the first time he had seen someone fight over a piece of scrap metal. Qing Fu, don't be rude. This young master isn't lying to you. That sword really is the worst here. Right when the two of them were staring at each other, a beautiful young woman walked over from the side and glared at the young man. After that, a smile appeared on her face as she said, Young master, I'm sorry. It's my fault for not teaching you properly, and I've made a fool of myself. Madam is too polite. Ning Chen smiled kindly. Finally, someone who could speak normally had come. If he continued talking with this youth, he was afraid he really wouldn't be able to resist slapping him to death. Mother. The youth looked at his mother with a wronged expression. He hadn't done anything wrong. How can you snatch something that someone else took a fancy to first? The woman looked at her son and scolded softly. She had hurried over when she saw the two of them arguing. She had seen all kinds of people in her life, and her intuition told her that this red-clothed youth wasn't simple. Qing Fu was still young, and her vision and knowledge were far from enough. That was why she had come out with them. She hadn't expected that this child would cause trouble when she didn't pay attention to him. Fortunately, the youth who argued with Qing Fu had good self-restraint. He wasn't one of those arrogant playboys in Yuzhou City. He hasn't bought it yet. The youth muttered softly. Ning Chen felt helpless. This youth didn't have any major problems. He was just a bit stupid. The woman glared at the young man once again. After which, she looked at the young man before her and said, "Young master, it was Qing Fu who was rude first. If young master takes a fancy to any sword, please feel free to tell me. Just treat it as me apologizing to young master for mistreating my youngest son. There's no need." Ning Chen smiled courteously. "It's just a small matter. Madam, there's no need to take it to heart. However, if your son wants to learn the sword, he only needs to buy a suitable sword, not some divine weapon. Young master understands the sword." A strange light flashed through the woman's eyes. However, as soon as she finished speaking, she realized that she had been rude. Why would someone who didn't understand the sword come to buy a sword? Moreover, what she had said was exactly the same as what that important figure had said when he had come to the mansion. Ning Chen smiled and didn't argue. He handed the 90 silver to the old man and then took the sword he had bought. He sighed inwardly. Hopefully, this sword would be able to last a few more days. I wonder if young master is interested in working for the city lord's mansion. All conditions can be discussed, said the woman softly. City lord's mansion. A trace of surprise appeared on Ning Chen's calm face. He looked at the woman and then at the stupid youth. He had misjudged. This time, he really hadn't noticed. Seeing Ning Chen waver, the woman hastily continued, "Once young master comes to the city lord's mansion, all you need to do is instruct my son in the sword. You don't need to do anything else. As for the reward, young master can just name it." If her intuition wasn't wrong, this young man was very likely to be her son's benefactor. She couldn't miss this opportunity. Only then did Ning Chen seriously look at the youth. Carefully examining him, he understood. His talent was only a so-so. He couldn't be considered an absolute genius, but he wasn't lacking either. Of course, that was secondary. The most important thing was that in this unfamiliar place, it was inconvenient for him to do anything. Perhaps the city lord's mansion could become his window to understand the entire heavenly mansion planet. Thinking of that, Ning Chen looked at the youth in front of him. He didn't hesitate too much and made his decision. Teaching. Not to mention that the person's aptitude was mediocre, even if the person was really a fool, he would teach him. Chapter 526. In the backyard of the city lord's residence in Yuzhou City, Qing Fu was practicing his swordsmanship. Ning Chen watched from the side with a complicated expression. Looking at the youth in front of him, he thought of himself. When he first entered Xia Palace, perhaps he was just as impulsive and reckless. If Zhang Sun and Qing Ning hadn't picked him up and brought him to Weiyang Palace, he probably would have died in the complicated undercurrents of Xia Palace. He wouldn't even have the chance to make a splash. The luckiest thing in his life was meeting Zhang Sun when he entered Xia Palace. The warmth, fear, and worry at that time were unforgettable. "Sir, bye, I'm done." The youth put away his sword and walked forward with sparkling eyes. After Sir Bai came to the residence, he defeated all the sword masters without even using his sword. It really scared him. Thinking back to that day, it really wasn't easy for him to keep his life. "Qing Fu, why are you learning swordsmanship?" Ning Chen looked at the youth and asked calmly. "Get rid of the strong and help the weak," Qing Fu said heroically. "Ha!" Ning Chen heard this and smiled gently. "Don't forget what you said today. In the future, when you go far and look back, this will be the only light you can see." Qing Ming was confused. He didn't understand at all. Ning Chen didn't explain much. He had to walk the path himself to understand. It was useless to explain to him now. Not losing one's original intention was the key to the path of martial arts. No matter what the purpose of picking up the sword was, only by following one's own path could one achieve the sword on the sword. Qing Ming's path had just begun. As long as he didn't take the wrong path, he would encounter these problems sooner or later. He couldn't stay here for too long. He could only tell him these words first. Even if he couldn't understand now, it was enough if he could remember it. In the backyard, a man in embroidered clothes stood quietly. He looked at the scene of martial arts teaching and couldn't help but sigh. Is Sir Bai still not willing to take Qing Fu as a disciple? The woman nodded. Sir Bai said that he will do his best to teach Qing Ming the sword these days, but there's no need to talk about taking him as a disciple. What a pity. A look of regret flashed across the man's face. Among the sword masters who had fought against Mr. Bai at the manor's martial arts competition, there was a true Khanate Fourth Tribulation expert. He was a consecrator of the city Lord Manor and had extraordinary strength. However, he had still been easily defeated by Mr. Bai, who hadn't even used his sword. After the competition, the minister had told him to keep Mr. Bai at all costs, because Mr. Bai was very important to Qing Fu's cultivation journey. A teacher's job was to impart knowledge, teach, and dispel doubts. It could be seen that Mr. Bai was indeed not an ordinary person. He had already reached an unimaginable level in the way of the sword. Before he taught and dispelled doubts, he had already imparted knowledge to them. It was a blessing that Qing Chang's teacher was such a powerful cultivator. Unfortunately, Yuzhou City was too small to restrain such a peerless genius for a long time. Mr. White, do you think I'm suitable to learn the sword? In the courtyard, Qing Chang raised his still young face and asked. Ning Chen smiled and said in a slightly more serious tone, your aptitude is not bad. Also, since you really want to learn the sword, don't doubt yourself. Your sword will waver because your mind is not firm. The essence of the sword is nothing more than speed, accuracy, and concentration. When your sword starts to waver and you strike, it will deviate from its essence. Sir, your words are too profound. I don't understand, said Qing Chang somewhat dispiritedly. Ning Chen raised his hand, and the wind and clouds stirred. A sword light broke through the air and pierced through a huge rock 30 meters away. If you don't understand what I'm saying, remember it first. Also, from tomorrow onwards, when you practice the sword, stab at the hole in the rock. When your sword doesn't deviate at all, you can learn other new things, said Ning Chen softly. Oh. Qing Ming nodded. After thinking for a while, he said, Sir, when can I practice until I'm as good as you? 20 years. Ning Chen sternly said, learning the sword isn't something that can be done in a single day. When I started learning martial arts, I was 16 like you. After 20 years of learning the sword, I finally comprehended my own sword. Your aptitude is a bit better than mine, but compared to some peerless geniuses, you're still lacking by quite a bit. Although aptitude is important, it isn't something that can be changed. So there's no need to feel sorry for yourself. Grasp what you have now, and as long as you use it well, you won't be weaker than anyone else. There really were geniuses who learned the sword. That was undeniable. For example, Wild, Mubai, and Senior. He had never been able to sense a sword aura, but Wild was able to easily sense it. Talent was something that couldn't be reasoned with. If you had it, you had it. If you didn't, you didn't. Perhaps Wild would one day become another unique sword cultivator. But to reach that height, talent alone wasn't enough. City Lord, the heavenly minister has arrived. Just at this moment, a guard quickly walked over from the backyard and respectfully bowed towards the man standing outside the courtyard. The man's expression froze. Looking at the two people in the courtyard, he quickly walked over to the front hall. He hadn't expected the heavenly minister to arrive so quickly. It seemed the imperial family was extremely concerned about the whereabouts of the vermilion bird divine treasure. However, the situation back then had been too chaotic. After the vermilion bird divine treasure had been rescued from the Supreme Mystery Palace and Celestial Heavenly Mountain, it had completely disappeared without a trace. Even now, there was still no news of it. Within the courtyard, when Ning Chen heard the news from the guard in the distance, a strange light flashed in his eyes. This heavenly minister wasn't someone easy to provoke. He hated trouble, and he hated troublesome people even more. At the same time, in the homeland of the Western Buddhists, a series of demonic curses and Buddhist chanting filled the air. On a mountain, in a huge demonic temple, a white-haired youth walked out. He held a Buddhist staff and wore a golden kasaya. He seemed both demonic and Buddha-like. In an instant, heaven and earth shook. Demonic Buddha, the master of the demonic temple, the demonic Buddha among demons, appeared in the world for the first time. In the instant he appeared, evil energy surged and gathered. At the same time, in the distance, in a palace that pierced the clouds, a violet-robed man walked out. His young face was arrogant and indifferent. The master of the divine palace and the purple heavenly palace appeared at the same time. The two strongest people of the four regions had reached an unimaginable height after seizing most of the origins of the divine prefecture of the eastern region. Today, in order to seize the ultimate essence, they joined forces again. The dragon gate appeared and descended with a rumble. The two of them walked into it and disappeared in the blink of an eye. At the same time, in the ancient land of Changling, the female supreme opened her eyes. She waved her hand to summon the dragon gate and entered as well. Boom! In the southwest of Central Plains, the nine heavens wind changed drastically. Thunder clouds rolled, and the oppressive aura was maddening. Under the thunder clouds, the demonic butterfly moved forward. Looking at the demonic will see that was 100 miles away, a demonic bloody light gradually rose in its blood-red eyes. His aura had disappeared. Was she too late? Boom! Lightning flashed and thunder roared across the nine heavens. Above the void, the wind and clouds rolled. Two dragon gates appeared. In the next moment, two powerful figures that caused the world to tremble walked out. In an instant, the thunder stopped. 100 miles fell into an oppressive silence. In front of the two dragon gates, one was dressed in golden robes. He looked like a youth with dazzling white hair. The other was dressed in purple. He was handsome and cold, his black hair dancing. The masters of the demon temple and the divine palace appeared in Central Plains together to seize the ultimate essence of martial arts. Looking at the two people who appeared in the air, the demonic butterfly's expression did not change. She waved her slender hand, and her sleeve opened. A black blade appeared. The flower burial blade appeared. It was murderous. In order to prevent any changes, do not delay. End this quickly, the purple heavenly palace said. All right. The demon Buddha twisted his fingers and responded. The two people descending from the sky clearly gave off a stronger might and pressure than anyone else Xiao Chen had met before. The demonic butterfly gathered her essence, and her blood-red hair fluttered in the wind. Her ultimate martial saber intent soared to its limits, and she fully unleashed her combat prowess. In the first move, the purple heavenly palace arrived in an instant. His palm condensed wind and clouds, and profound thunder descended from the nine heavens. His shocking power caused the universe to tremble. The demonic butterfly focused and slashed with the flower burial blade. A black ice flower fell from the sky, supporting the ultimate martial might. With a boom, the blade and palm collided. The ground within 100 miles caved in. Rumbling shockwaves spread out endlessly. In the second move, the demon Buddha moved. The demonic butterfly had used up all her energy. Before she could gather any new energy, the Buddhist staff gathered boundless evil energy and attacked. As the killing move approached, the demonic butterfly gathered her true energy. She pulled out her blade and blocked the demon Buddha's staff. With a muffled groan, the corners of her mouth were dyed red. The demonic aura entered her body. The demonic butterfly felt her blood chi tumble. Her power was immediately suppressed. Fighting one against two, the demonic butterfly was in danger. At this moment, another dragon gate appeared in the sky. The female venerate appeared. She took a step forward and a palm fell from the sky. Female venerate. Seeing the newcomer, the demon Buddha's expression darkened. His evil energy gathered and he flipped his palm to the sky. With a bang, the two palms collided. Under the demon Buddha's feet, the ground caved in dozens of feet. Dust and sand roiled. Pew! The situation slowed slightly. The demonic butterfly spat out a mouthful of blood. New wounds and old wounds erupted at the same time. Female venerate, it is foolish to interfere in this battle. The demon Buddha's lips curved in an eerie arc as he sneered. The female venerate ignored him. She pushed the vital energy in her palm a third more. A vast palm forced the former back. After a few steps, the demon Buddha stopped. His staff moved through the air. A ultimate move was about to appear. Seeing this, the female venerate flashed in front of the butterfly. She took the ladder and retreated hundreds of feet away. On the other side, the purple heavenly palace took a step forward and blocked the two's path of retreat. A pair of eerie eyes narrowed. It really was strange that the usually mysterious Changling female venerate would interfere in this matter. However, no matter how strong the female venerate was, she was only one person. It was a fool's dream to want to save someone. The situation was tense, and the atmosphere was becoming more and more oppressive. Just as the battle was about to begin again, suddenly, a sword light descended from the sky, splitting the battle apart. At the same time, in the distant night sky, footsteps could be heard, and sword will could be heard. A handsome and extraordinary figure walked over. The appearance of a legendary figure had changed the tide of the battle. Take her away. Leave them to me. After a few steps, Imperial Prince Yen walked into the battle. He waved his hand to put down the sword guard and said, "N." The female venerate nodded and said calmly, "I hope that you will have fun this time." Finishing, the female venerate did not tarry. She took the heavily injured butterfly and quickly left. Chapter 527. In the front hall of the Castellan's mansion in Yuzhou City, a middle-aged man in blue and white clothes was sitting quietly while a girl in black clothes was standing behind him. She looked only a few years older than Qing Fu. However, her looming aura was many times more powerful than the idiot in Ning Chen's eyes. The Tianfu star's Tianxiang dynasty, Xiao Bieli. He was the Tianxiang dynasty's pillar of support against the other large sections. Even the imperial family didn't dare to provoke such a major figure. Now that he had personally come to the city lord's mansion, the entire city lord's mansion became nervous. Xiao Bieli hadn't even finished his first cup of tea when a man in embroidered robes walked out. Looking at the two of them, he took a step forward and respectfully bowed. Yuzhou City's city lord, Ren Baixio, greets Lord Tianxiang. Stand up, said Xiao Bieli calmly. Thank you, Lord Tianxiang, said Ren Baixio respectfully. His Majesty sent me here to investigate the Vermilion Bird Divine Treasury. Yuzhou City is the closest place to the Vermilion Bird Divine Treasury. Is there any special information? Xiao Bieli put down his teacup. Reporting to Lord Tianxiang. Ren Baixio recounted what had happened that day. Like what most people in Yuzhou City knew, someone had released the Vermilion Bird in the hands of the Supreme Mystery Palace and Tiande Mountain. However, nobody knew the identity of the person who had released the Vermilion Bird. In the Tianxiang dynasty, and even in the entire Tianfu star, there weren't many experts skilled in archery. Especially those who were truly skilled in archery. As Xiao Bieli listened to Ren Baixio's story, he began to ponder. Who could that unknown expert be? He knew all the experts on the Tianfu star who were skilled in archery. With their statuses, it was impossible for them to come all the way to Yuzhou City for a groundless divine treasury. Too many divine treasures had appeared in the past few years, and it was impossible to tell whether they were real or fake. However, there didn't seem to be any experts skilled in archery in the nearby large sections. That was strange. After thinking for a moment, Xiao Bieli didn't want to waste any more time. He looked at the city lord and said, "Let me ask you a question. A red-robed young man. He looks to be in his 20s, and his cultivation base is above the Xiantian realm. It shouldn't be difficult to find him in Yuzhou City. Once you find him, don't alarm him. Just send someone to inform me. Hearing Minister of Heaven describe the person, Ren Baixiu's heart jumped. Mr. White? Why is the Minister of Heaven looking for Mr. Bai? Could it be that Mr. Bai has offended the Minister of Heaven in some way? City Lord Ren. Just as Ren Baixiu was in a daze, a calm voice suddenly sounded out, penetrating his body and reaching his heart. Ren Baixiu quivered. Looking at the heavenly manifestation in front of him, he hurriedly knelt down. Xiao Bieli asked indifferently, City Lord Ren, do you know the person I'm talking about? Reporting to Lord Heavenly Minister. Ren Baixiu suppressed his pounding heart as he replied, there's a new Mr. Bai in our mansion, who looks a bit similar to the one mentioned by Heavenly Minister. However, as Mr. Bai comes from the south and has just arrived at Yuzhou City, he should not be the one that you're looking for. Oh. Xiao Bieli's eyes narrowed when he heard this, and he said, bring me over to get acquainted with them. Yes. Ren Baixiu respectfully complied. In the backyard of the city lord's mansion, in front of a huge rock, Qing Fu was practicing her sword. Every strike created sparks around the sword marks. Each mark was only an inch long and could only accommodate a single strike. Qing Fu had practiced for an unknown period of time, but he hadn't been able to land a single strike. Sir! Qing Fu turned around, his eyes filled with grievance. If he continued like this, when would he ever be able to land a strike? Tired? Ning Chen didn't blame him when he saw the youth stop. Yes. Qing Fu nodded. Ning Chen calmly asked, can you still persist? Qing Fu thought for a moment and nodded once more. Ning Chen softly said, then persist a little longer. Qing Fu's immature face turned bitter. He had no choice but to turn around and endure the pain in his arm as he continued to practice. Outside the backyard, Xiao Bieli stopped. He looked at the red-robed young man in the courtyard, then looked at the youth practicing in front of the huge rock. He didn't go forward and chose to wait. Ren Baixiu's eyes flashed with doubt. Could it be that Mr. Bai really isn't the person Lord Heavenly Minister is looking for? Heavenly Minister, the person you're looking for is inside. Why aren't you going in? Asked the black-robed girl. Xiao Bieli replied, there's no rush. Wait a moment. The girl was puzzled, and she asked, why? The inheritance shouldn't be disturbed by anything, said Xiao Bieli calmly. Within the courtyard, Ning Chen also saw the heavenly minister outside. But as he was teaching Qing Fu, he didn't pay attention to what was happening outside. After another 15 minutes, Qing Fu stopped once more. His arm was in so much pain that he couldn't even raise it. He turned his head and looked at his teacher. Why was he still unable to stab him? Can you still persist? Soon. Perhaps in another 15 minutes, you'll be able to stab him, said Ning Chen softly. All right. Qing Fu clenched his teeth and nodded. He once more began to practice. Another 15 minutes later, just a little longer. Soon, 30 minutes later, the last 15 minutes, 30 minutes later, clang. After practicing for so many times, Qing Fu's arm was almost numb. She only knew how to draw her sword out of reflex. Then, as everyone held their breaths and watched, a clear sound rang out. The sound of a sword entering the sword mark was transmitted into the hearts of everyone inside and outside the courtyard. City Lord Ren, congratulations. Xiao Bieli calmly glanced at the man beside him. Ren Baixiu was startled and revealed a puzzled expression. He didn't know what the heavenly minister meant by congratulating him. Within the courtyard, Qing Fu looked at the sword that had entered a sword mark. His bitter little face now revealed a brilliant smile. He turned to look at his teacher, waiting for praise. Ning Chen walked up and patted the youth's head. He softly said, not bad. In the future, you'll be able to practice like this every day. If you want to give up, don't say it so easily. Today, you have your teacher's encouragement, but perhaps in the future, you won't. People have to learn to be strong and learn to grow up. You're already 16 and are no longer a child. Yes. Qing Fu nodded hard and agreed. Pass on the Tao, teach, dispel doubts. Outside the courtyard, Xiao Bieli gently sighed. He could see that this youth was truly teaching with all his heart. He wasn't just passing on a few moves. The 2 hours he had waited had been worth it. Xinghong, go test out this youth's skills, said Xiao Bieli. Yes. Fan Xinghong nodded and walked into the courtyard. Senior Heavenly Minister. Ren Baixiu's expression became anxious. There's no need for that. I know what I'm doing. Xiao Bieli raised a hand to stop him from continuing. Within the courtyard, Ning Chen looked at the young woman who had walked in alone. He understood that in the end, he couldn't avoid it. This heavenly minister had already begun to suspect him. Qing Fu, you stay a bit further away. Watch the next battle carefully. As long as you practice seriously, in 20 years, you'll be even stronger than me, said Ning Chen. Okay, Qing Fu responded and walked away obediently. Sir, bye, please. Fan Xinghong waved her hand and unsheathed cold blade. A long and narrow willow saber pierced through the air. The moment the saber arrived, the battle began. Ning Chen gripped his sword, and a blue sword appeared. An ordinary weapon collided with a famous saber. Outside the courtyard, Xiao Bieli calmly watched. He truly did suspect this youth. Not everything in the world could be explained by coincidence. There weren't many people that he would take a fancy to. For such a coincidence to appear in Nether Prefecture's city, it was truly thought-provoking. In the southwest of the central prefecture, 100 miles away from the demonic will sea, thunder rumbled. Under the dark clouds, the flames of war ignited. The legendary cultivator had 2 swords against 2 sovereigns. On the side, the noble woman carried the heavily injured butterfly and quickly retreated. You want to leave? Difficult. The demonic Buddha's expression turned cold. The golden ring on his staff swayed, and evil energy gathered. He attacked the noble woman who was about to leave. The legendary cultivator stepped forward like a shadow, instantly blocking the 2 of them. His blue sword met the moon, and extreme cold sealed the evil energy. Let's go. With a bang, the evil energy scattered. The Yen Grand Prince's back was facing the 2 of them. The noble woman nodded and turned into a streak of light, carrying the butterfly away. The ultimate point of martial arts had been taken away. In the violet heavenly palace, the demonic Buddha's face darkened, and his murderous intent raged wildly. Since you let her go, then you can taste it with your life. As soon as he finished speaking, the purple sky palace's figure flickered. His palm gathered wind and lightning and slammed out. The demonic Buddha combined their moves at the same time. Heavy evil energy gathered between heaven and earth. Its supreme power shocked the 9 heavens. The Yen Grand Prince's 2 swords rotated. He stepped out, and his sword followed. The red sword cut through the wind and clouds on his left, and the blue sword broke through 1,000 pounds on his right. With a bang, heaven and earth tilted. The stalemate between heaven and earth seemed to be a draw. Green and red breath at the same time, absolute chi. With a light shout, the green and red swords in the Yen Grand Prince's hands turned into 2 rainbows. They spun rapidly and flew toward the 2 sovereigns. The purple sky palace and the demonic Buddha looked serious. They used their vital energy to block the 2 swords. The palm and the sword collided. There was a loud bang, and the aftermath was like rolling waves. Amidst the dust and sand, the Yen Grand Prince's figure disappeared. The 2 swords flew back and swapped left and right. The cold and fast swords slashed open the road to hell. Boom! Thunder rumbled, lighting up the dark world. Under the dark clouds, the three strongest people in the world started their peak battle. The palm and the sword cut off the path of life, and the sword turned reincarnation. The rare battle shocked the wind and clouds within 100 miles. With a ripping sound, the clothes of the two sovereigns split open at the same time. The sword light brushed past them. It was a close call. The purple sky palace's face turned cold. He turned his palm over and a giant dragon gate appeared behind him. Its heavy energy made the moon pale in comparison. The Yen Grand Prince's figure turned instantly. The red sword moved quickly and broke the move in front of him. The demonic Buddha formed a seal to block the legendary figure, but the blue sword flew over and sealed the evil energy. With a loud bang, the three moves collided. The aftermath was endless. The ground cracked open, and the shockwaves spread hundreds of miles away. Thud! A drop of blood slid down silently. The corner of the legendary figure's mouth turned red for the first time. Although the move of the most powerful sovereign was broken, the aftermath was still shocking. Ordinary people couldn't block it. Why did he feel so happy inside? The injured Yen Grand Prince smiled for the first time. He loosened his hands. The green and red swords flew out and returned to their sheaths. In the next moment, the abyss condensation and the sand sword flew out. Endless sword pressure surged out. Chapter 528. Yuzhou City, the City Lord's Mansion. The celestial minister was watching the battle, confirming his doubts. Fan Xinghong stepped forward, her willow saber fluttering in the wind. It was a strange martial art that was difficult to catch. On the other hand, Ning Chen was slashing out with his sword. His every move was simple and easy to understand. Both sides were holding back, controlling the shockwaves of their battle to within 30 meters. They didn't affect the three people in the distance. Xinghong's saber moved faster and faster, while knowing destiny slowed down as much as possible. In the distance, Qing Fu was seriously watching his teacher's moves. This was his teacher's first time teaching the sword, so he couldn't miss it. Outside the back courtyard, Xiao Libi was calmly watching their battle. His eyes constantly flashed. This person's attainments in the sword were extraordinary. City Lord Ren, did he make any requests for coming here to teach the sword? Asked Xiao Libi. No. Ren Baixiu shook his head. Strange. Xiao Libi narrowed his eyes. Just what was this person's goal? Within the courtyard, the battle between the saber and the sword was becoming more and more intense. Ning Chen knew that the celestial minister was outside, so he was holding back. The simplest sword was facing the sharpest saber. The battle reached a stalemate. Fan Xinghong gathered her energy, and her willow saber spun. In an instant, willow leaves filled the sky and swallowed them. Ning Chen's footsteps spun. His figure was like an illusion as he dodged the willow leaves in the wind. His blue sword slashed out. The blue sword stopped an inch away from the girl's heart. The battle was over. Thank you for letting me win. Ning Chen put away his sword. Fan Xinghong was startled. She didn't understand why she, who had just gained the upper hand, would suddenly lose. Wonderful. Xiao Libi clapped his hands as he walked into the courtyard. He looked at the red-robed youth and said, as expected, heroes come from the youth. Master Bai's sword rarely meets a match. You praise me too much. Before the celestial minister, who would dare say that they rarely meet a match? Ning Chen smiled. Hypocrite. Fan Xinghong snorted coldly. She put away her saber and walked behind the celestial minister. Mr. Bai, there's no need to be so modest. I'm well aware of Xinghong's strength. No ordinary person can defeat her, smiled Xiao Libi. Ning Chen didn't want to waste time on this topic. Therefore, he put it straightforwardly, if Lord Tianxiang suspects that the vermilion bird immortal stash is in my hand, you've got the wrong person. I came to Yuzhou City for something else. Before that, I didn't know that the immortal stash was going to appear. Oh. Xiao Bieli's eyes narrowed slightly. Is it really not with you? I swear to the heavens, Ning Chen replied. Xiao Bieli nodded, and then he waved his hand and tossed over a gold command token. He said, since it's like that, then I won't disturb you any longer. This is a Heavenly Minister command token. If Mr. Bai needs my help in the future, then feel free to use this command token to look for me in Heavenly Minister City. Ning Chen accepted the gold medallion and did not refuse. He said, thank you for your kind intentions, Lord Minister of Heaven. Xinghong, let's go. Xiao Bieli spoke, and then he turned around and walked out of the courtyard. Outside the rear courtyard, Ren Baixiu respectfully sent him off. At some unknown time, his clothes had already been soaked through. Minister of Heaven, is the vermilion bird divine treasury really not with him? Fan Xinghong finally couldn't help but ask after they left the city lord's estate. Cultivators are plagued by tribulations and tribulations, so they won't easily swear oaths. There's no need to doubt that, said Xiao Bieli calmly. Then why did you give him a heavenly minister command token? Could it be that he's that valuable in your eyes? Fan Xinghong was puzzled. A heavenly minister command token was extremely precious. Even quasi-exalts were unable to obtain it. In the eyes of the minister of heaven, the word genius was meaningless. Do you know that young genius from the Seven Kills Palace? Xiao Bieli didn't answer her directly. I do. Fan Xinghong nodded. On the Tianfu planet, there was no one who didn't know that peerless genius from the Seven Kills Palace. He was a supreme expert of the younger generation who would definitely become a exalt. Even world exalts weren't willing to offend him. Between the two of them, if I had to choose one, I would choose that young man called Bai Yujing. That doesn't mean he's stronger than the Seven Kills Palace's young genius. It's just that martial strength isn't the only thing that determines a person's value, said Xiao Bieli. Knowledge, experience, endurance, strength, intelligence, to judge a person, there were far too many things that needed to be looked at. The talent of the Seven Kills Temple's peerless geniuses was truly unprecedented since ancient times. However, if one stood too high, then when one fell from the divine altar, they would fall even harder. Bai Yujing no longer exuded such a sharp aura. It was very rare for a young man to have such an aura, especially one with such astonishing strength. The only explanation was that he had experienced failure, and it wasn't just once or twice. It wasn't wrong to be frivolous when one was young. However, there was only a fine line between frivolity and impulsiveness. Sometimes, one wrong step could mean the entire game was lost. In the northern plains of the inner world, there was a vast expanse of snow. In a canyon that had existed since ancient times, the divine pavilion stood tall. The words, heavenly sound, reflected the great Tao. Behind the divine pavilion, in an unknown space, a white-clothed woman with chains pierced through her shoulder blades pushed the heavenly sound Tao mill. The sound of the great Tao rang out, resonating with heaven and earth. Master, why did she agree to push the heavenly sound Tao mill? Asked Wu Qingying. She wants to prolong someone's life. In our deal, as long as she agrees to push the heavenly sound Tao mill, I will prolong that person's life, said the heavenly sound pavilion's master calmly. Master, can you tell that this woman has lost some of her memories? Asked Wu Qingying softly. It's a pity that she has forgotten her past. However, she still can't sever the emotions that should be forgotten, said the heavenly sound pavilion's master indifferently. Emotions hurt others, but also hurt oneself. Wu Qingying sighed. In front of the heavenly sound Tao mill, the woman walked step by step around the heavenly sound Tao mill. After 3 years, no blood seeped out from her shoulder blades. The great Tao cherished the sound. Every sound was made with blood. Her hair was messy, casually falling behind her. Her white clothes were stained with blood. She was the most outstanding descendant of the Zine royal family in the barren city for thousands of years. For the barren city, she walked the path of forgetting her emotions. However, in the end, she still couldn't escape the cycle of reincarnation. At the same time, outside the demonic will sea, a shocking battle was taking place. The legend fought against two venerables. Endless sword pressure surged between heaven and earth. The strongest sword only needed to be proven. After the deities left, the demonic Buddha and the violet heavenly palace were the greatest beneficiaries of the 5 regions. They had seized the source of the divine prefecture and taken the most important half-step. They were only a hair away from crossing the final boundary of humanity. The two venerables, who had surpassed the peak of the prime level, were undoubtedly the strongest existences in the world. When they joined forces, the 9 heavens' fury surged, and a calamity appeared again. In the most extreme battle, the legend wasn't afraid of death. He raised his 2 swords against the two venerables. His sword will was raised to the limit of his life. In order to prove his sword, he abandoned everything. Demonic Dharma, evil words to save the world. The demonic Buddha slammed his staff on the ground, and the evil chi around him rose to the extreme. Endless evil chi gathered from heaven and earth, forming a dark world to trap the battle. Purple chi from the east, divine martial dharma. The violet heavenly palace also activated his shocking martial arts. He turned his palm to the sky, and the martial god came to the world. The strongest move, the heaviest pressure. The legend let out a long shout. His black hair danced wildly, and the sand sword in his hand scattered. The sword appeared in the wind, invisible and traceless. The fluttering green clothes and the moving sand sword were fast. In the world of evil chi, even the martial god's moves couldn't stop the extreme sword. The legend, who had used all his combat power, was so powerful that it was terrifying. The demonic Buddha and the violet heavenly palace saw that their opponents were shocked. Their figures flashed, and they pressed forward. The 3 people clashed, and the aftermath surged endlessly. The world, which had suffered a great calamity, collapsed again. Mountains fell and the ground fell within 100 miles. In the dust, the violet heavenly palace flew 10 feet away. He looked at the man in green in front of him with an unprecedentedly serious expression. There was actually such a powerful cultivator in the 5 regions. In the battle, the demonic Buddha and the legend of the demonic Buddha had endless evil chi. Madras kept circling around the Buddha. His body was like a young man, but he had the power to overturn mountains and seas. Every time he made a move, thousands of feet of earth would sink. Facing the destructive power of the demonic Buddha, Prince Yan's abyss condensed black light shone brightly. The sealing sword reappeared in the style of the forbidden martial arts. Annihilation, devouring, good and evil. At this moment, it was difficult to distinguish. The extreme powers kept colliding, and the world fell. Strong, undeniably strong. It was beyond the knowledge of the warriors in the world. It turned out that human martial arts could be cultivated to such a terrifying level. It turned out that when the sword in one's hand was practiced to the extreme, it could really kill demons and Buddhas. You're not even a half venerable. How long can you last at such a peak? The demonic Buddha said coldly. He turned his palm to block the sword light. It's enough time to kill you. Prince Yan waved his sword. The sand on the sword flew wildly. The sand sword filled the world. Every grain of sand was a sword. The sword will threaten to take one's life. The demonic Buddha formed a madras to block the sand sword. With a violent sound, his Buddhist robe was dyed red. On the other side, the violet heavenly palace saw an opportunity. He flashed past and put his palm on the back of the legend of the demonic Buddha. With a buzz, the sword flew out from the sword rack and blocked the demonic Buddha's palm. The legend of the demonic Buddha turned around and held his sword. The violet heavenly palace blocked the sword. With a bang, he took a few steps back. His blood was boiling. Not bad. As he spoke, the violet heavenly palace raised his energy again. His purple chi was vast and mighty. It was like a giant dragon had appeared in the world. The world trembled under the pressure. The demonic Buddha raised his energy at the same time. He chanted in an evil voice. The Buddha's words spread. The world-shaking evil energy reappeared in the world. The two most powerful venerables in the world pushed their martial arts to the extreme. The unshakable pressure spread under the dark clouds. That kind of destructive pressure could be felt thousands of miles away. 3 swords in the sky, life and death pact. Prince Yen knew that the two venerables' attacks were not ordinary. He pointed his finger and condensed his energy. The 3 swords in the sand turned into sword rainbows and broke through the sky. The 3 attacks collided. The sand was dyed red. The swords in the sand pierced the demonic Buddha's heart. Ugh! With a groan, the demonic Buddha took a few steps back. Blood spurted out from his chest and spilled onto the ground. However, in the next moment, a shocking scene occurred. The demonic Buddha's evil energy spread in front of his chest. The fatal wound healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. Undying body. Prince Yen squinted his eyes and said slowly. Surprised? It's too late. The demonic Buddha snorted. He flipped his palm and the evil spirits of the 9th heaven descended. The gloomy death chi surged wildly. It made people feel the fear of doomsday. Chapter 529. Outside the demonic will see, the battle between the two venerables had reached its climax. Not a single part of the devastated land remained unscathed. There were cracks and ravines everywhere. In Prince Yan's hands, the abyss congealing sword and Jiga sword hummed. The 2 swords fought against the 2 venerables. At the same time, the sand sword in the wind filled the air. The battle intent of the legend was fully unleashed. His pace was getting faster and faster. He controlled 3 swords. The sword and the palm collided. Waves of dust rolled. The cyan robe disappeared. The Jiga sword shook the Buddhist staff. The evil energy was scattered. Buddha among demons and venerables among humans. They didn't dare to be careless in front of the sword congealing sword. They pushed their cultivation to the limit. The great path resonated. On the rumbling ground, the white-haired young man and the golden cassock fluttered. The evil energy was added to the power of the evil energy. The Jiga sword cut down demons and demons. The sword was fast and heavy. One sword after another collided with the evil energy of the demons and Buddha. On the other side, Zi Tiangong was surrounded by purple clouds. He was the most powerful person in the world. The power of his palm was earth-shattering. His speed was also extremely fast. Boom! Thunder roared. Purple thunder fell from the sky. The god-congealed sword was the most powerful person in the world. The abyss-congealing sword shook the venerables. The black light swallowed the sky and the earth. The sealed sword was completely revived. The legend of the sword was reborn. The battle continued. Killing light filled the sky. The wind and sand blew. The wind and clouds changed. This was the first time the world had seen a battle at the peak of the world. In the distance, the female honor left with the butterfly. After stabilizing the injury of the former, she waved her hand and opened the sky to watch the battle. Who is he? The demonic butterfly opened her eyes. She looked at the peerless swordsman in the battle and asked. Prince Yen of the Great Xia. He is Ning Chen's only elder now, the female honor said softly. The demonic butterfly's eyes flashed with sadness. Why was his path so difficult when he had such a strong elder? All the disciples of the world had elders to protect them. But he could only struggle forward step by step and shoulder everything. Seeing the sadness in the butterfly's eyes, the female honor sighed softly. He is the Marquis of Jiming, the savior of the divine land, the devil hated by millions of people. He will never be tired, never. A strong person would always be relied on by the people around him. The study of the Marquis Jiming's mansion was the coldest place she had ever seen. It was so cold that she couldn't even feel sleepy. He was conferred the title of Marquis at a young age. During the chaotic times, he forced the knowing destiny state cultivator to grow up. When the world was peaceful and the deities left, everything was settled. However, he was already covered in wounds. He would never be able to repay the favor he owed. She and Jiming Marquis had talked a lot about Great Xia, the world, and the human world. However, he had never talked about himself. Maybe he owed her too much, so Jiming Marquis could never talk about love again. Come back to Chongling with me. Nothing will happen to him so easily. At least, before he awakens that woman, he will survive at all costs. The woman looked at the butterfly next to her and said, "No need. When I recover, I will go find him," the butterfly said softly. She had thought that she would never have anything to worry about in this life. It was her junior sect brother's appearance that made her see a similar but different version of herself. Since the road ahead was so difficult, she would do her best to walk with him. Hearing this, the female honor sighed again and did not try to persuade her. In the distant battle, the legend who was fighting at full power was using up more and more vital energy. Seeing this, the two venerables increased their attacks. They had to eliminate this mortal enemy completely. Finally, has he reached his limit? Prince Yen sighed softly. If he thought more, he could fight a little longer. It's coming. The legend's sword stopped for a moment. The demon Buddha, Purple Sky Palace, the female honor, and the butterfly all focused. The next move would decide the victor. Sword. The legend stepped forward, his black hair flying. With a whisper, the surrounding world suddenly quieted down. His sword had reached its limit, and it was the final move of proving the sword. Before the sword was even drawn, the earth within 300 miles shook, and the demonic wheel suffered a calamity. Before the coffins could even appear, they were swallowed up by the sword wheel that permeated the air, and instantly disappeared. Retreat. An unprecedented fear of death rose in the hearts of the two venerables. Zi Tiangong shouted in a deep voice and quickly retreated. The demon Buddha did not dare to stay any longer. He chanted and retreated quickly. However, it was too late. Around the legend, endless sword pressure spread out. Wherever his will was, the sword would be there. The sword had surpassed the limits of the mortal world. Wherever the sword went, heaven and earth would disappear. The shocking scene made people feel fear deep in their bones. The dissipated cyan robe appeared in front of the two venerables. He waved the two swords. Blood spurted out. Ugh! After two groans, the two venerables vomited blood. They did not dare to hesitate and immediately ran away. Crack. Two crisp sounds. Chi condensed. The halberd cracked and quickly turned into ashes. The sword of the mortal world could not bear the sword of another. It had reached the end of its life. What a pity. In the distance, the female honor looked regretful. The demon Buddha and Purple Sky Palace were not destined to die. The sword of the mortal world was too weak. Outside the demon will see, Prince Yen withdrew his presence and walked silently to the sword rack. He waved his hand and put away the sword. Then he turned and walked towards the demon will see. In the distance, the female honor and Mo Dai's expressions changed slightly. A moment later, they sighed softly and did not stop him. The mortal world could not prove his sword. Maybe he could only place his hopes on the illusory immortals. The loneliness of an expert was so sad. He walked the path of the legendary sword too quickly. He missed the best opponent. When he wanted to prove his sword again, there was no one to prove it to. Let us part here. Thank you for your help this time, female honor, Mo Dai stood and said. Be careful in the future. Purple Sky Palace and the Demon Buddha will not give up so easily. The female honor nodded and reminded. Yes, I will. Mo Dai responded. She did not linger and left. After Mo Dai left, the female honor turned and walked into the Dragon Gate and disappeared. In the homeland of West Buddha, in the ancient land of Changling. The female honor returned. She came forward and said with narrowed eyes, "How is Butterfly in the flower?" "She is fine. She was not willing to come to Changling with me and left. However, after this calamity, she will be more careful. It will be difficult for Purple Sky Palace and the Demon Buddha to take Ji Yuan," the female honor answered. "What about Prince Yen? Did he prove his sword?" the female honor continued to ask. The female honor shook her head and sighed. Purple Sky Palace and the Demon Buddha could not prove his sword. The legend of the Great Xia has entered the demon will see. Maybe, there will be a day when he will not come out. Hearing this, the female honor fell silent. She had not expected that the two of them together could not prove a legendary sword. This matter is over. Next, I will take half of the Marquis Ji Ming to the northern plains. Whether or not I can extend his life will depend on whether that person is willing to act, the female honor said. Be careful. She is not weaker than you. Also, being in the cold northern plains, our abilities will be greatly affected, the female honor reminded. Understood, I will be careful. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.